Hello and welcome to Black Magic, your home for amazing stories. Today's story is what if Nicolas Flamel sent someone using Philosopher's Stone at age 6 and found Harry dying of starvation. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoy it, and subscribe if you haven't already. We post new stories regularly. Let's get started. Chapter 1, The boy who survived the cupboard under the stairs was silent except for the shallow, labored breathing of the small boy curled on a threadbare mattress. 6-year-old Harry Potter pressed a hand against his stomach as it twisted painfully. 3 days. It had been 3 days since Aunt Petunia had shoved a piece of dry toast and half a glass of water through the slot in his door. His punishment for making Dudley's birthday cake explode, though Harry still didn't understand how that could possibly have been his fault. Harry closed his eyes, trying to ignore the gnawing emptiness. He'd long since learned that crying made things worse. Uncle Vernon hated the noise. Instead, he focused on the familiar fantasy that someone, anyone, might come and take him away from this place. "Please," he whispered into the darkness, his voice barely audible. "I just want to go home." But this was home, wasn't it? The cupboard with spiders and dust and the mattress that smelled of mildew. The house where his name was Boy, and where food was a privilege he often hadn't earned. Something stirred inside Harry then, not his stomach this time, but deeper. A warmth that started in his chest and spread outward through his fingers and toes. He'd felt it before, usually when he was scared or angry. But this was different. More desperate. More focused. "Help me," Harry whispered, not knowing who he was asking. The warmth intensified until it felt like his whole body was humming with it. "Please. I don't want to be here anymore." Somewhere in his fevered state, Harry imagined he could see a red light pulsing in rhythm with his heart. And then, just before exhaustion claimed him, he thought he heard a voice, distant but clear. "I'm coming, child." Nicolas Flamel was brewing tea when he felt it, a distinct pull on his consciousness, like a hook behind his navel. He dropped the porcelain cup, barely registering the crash as it shattered across the stone floor of his laboratory. "Impossible," he whispered. For 600 years, Nicolas had kept the Philosopher's Stone secure. 6 centuries of protecting his greatest creation from those who would misuse it. And in all that time, nothing like this had ever happened. Someone was calling to the stone. Not just seeking it or trying to steal it, but calling to it on a fundamental, magical level. The connection hummed with raw need and desperation. "Perenelle." Nicolas called, his voice sharp with urgency. The ancient alchemist moved with surprising quickness across his laboratory to where the stone lay safely ensconced in its warded cabinet. The stone was glowing. Pulses of ruby light emanated from its core in a rhythm that reminded Nicolas distinctly of a heartbeat. In 600 years, he'd never seen it do that. His wife appeared in the doorway, silver-streaked dark hair pulled back from her face, eyes alert. "What's happened?" "Someone's connected to the stone." Nicolas gestured to the pulsing red gem. "Look at it, Nellie. It's responding to someone." Perenelle Flamel stepped forward, her brow furrowed. She was as old as Nicolas, though neither of them appeared older than a well-preserved 60. Her eyes, however, held the wisdom of centuries. Who could possibly? She studied the stone carefully, then closed her eyes. After several moments, she inhaled sharply. "It's a child." "A child?" Nicolas stared at his wife in disbelief. "That's not possible." "I feel it too," she insisted. "Young. Very young. And in terrible distress." She opened her eyes, and they were bright with concern. "We need to find them, Nicolas. Now." Nicolas nodded grimly. He'd spent centuries protecting the stone from dark wizards and power-hungry alchemists. But this was different. This was a child somehow forming a spontaneous magical link with one of the most powerful magical objects in existence. "I can track the connection," he said, already moving toward his workbench. "But it will take time." "We may not have time," Perenelle replied, placing her hand over the stone. The child's life force is weak. Nicholas worked quickly, assembling a makeshift tracking charm using a silver pendulum and a fragment of the stone's energy. I've never felt a connection like this. It's almost as if the stone recognized them, Perenelle finished. The pendulum began to spin, slowly at first, then faster until it suddenly stopped, pointing firmly toward the southeast. Britain, Nicholas murmured. That narrows it somewhat. He concentrated harder, feeding more of his own magic into the tracking spell. The map beneath the pendulum shifted, zooming in closer and closer until finally settling on a suburban street. Little Whinging, Surrey, Nicholas read. Number 4, Privet Drive. Perenelle was already collecting her traveling cloak. I know that address, she said, her voice tight with sudden tension. Nicholas looked up sharply. How? Albus Dumbledore. Her expression darkened. He mentioned it once when discussing the Potter boy's placement. Nicholas went very still. Harry Potter. The boy who lived. The same. Perenelle's eyes flashed with sudden anger. Albus assured us the child was safe and well cared for. If he's the one calling to the stone. Then Albus was wrong, Perenelle said flatly. We need to go. Now. Nicholas secured the stone in an inner pocket of his robes. He couldn't risk leaving it behind, not with this unexplained connection active. Together, they stepped into their home's apparition chamber. Ready? He asked his wife. Perenelle nodded grimly. Let us hope we're not too late. With a crack, they vanished. Privet Drive was unnervingly quiet when Nicholas and Perenelle appeared behind a large hedge bordering number 6. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the identical houses with their identical gardens. Nicholas immediately felt the stone grow warmer in his pocket as they approached number 4. The connection is stronger here, he murmured to Perenelle. It's definitely coming from inside that house. They approached the door, glamour charms making them appear as ordinary middle-aged visitors rather than centuries-old magical beings. Nicholas raised his hand to knock, but Perenelle caught his wrist. Wait, she whispered. Something's wrong. Nicholas felt it too, a heaviness in the air, a sense of misery that seemed to seep from the very walls of the house. And underneath it all, the desperate magical signature that had called to the stone. He's in there, Nicholas said. And he's fading. Perenelle's expression hardened. Then we no longer have time for courtesy. With a subtle flick of her wand, the front door unlocked and swung open. They stepped inside, into a house that was painfully ordinary. Too ordinary, as if someone had studied what a normal home should look like and then replicated it with obsessive precision. Hello. Nicholas called. Is anyone home? Heavy footsteps approached from what appeared to be the kitchen. A large, purple-faced man appeared, mustache bristling with indignation. Who the devil are you? How dare you barge into my home? Vernon Dursley bellowed. Nicholas smiled pleasantly, though his eyes remained cold. We're looking for Harry Potter. I believe he resides here. Vernon's face went from purple to white in an instant. There's no one by that name here. You've got the wrong house. Now get out before I call the police. That's strange, Perenelle said softly, her wand now visible in her hand. Because we can sense him quite clearly. A thin, horse-faced woman appeared behind Vernon, her eyes widening at the sight of the wand. Vernon, she hissed in warning. Where is the boy, Petunia Dursley? Perenelle asked, her voice leaving no room for argument. You're one of them, Petunia spat, backing away. We want nothing to do with your kind. We never asked for him, never wanted him. Nicholas felt a surge of anger, but kept his voice even. Where is Harry? Neither Dursley answered. The stone in Nicholas's pocket grew warmer still, pulling him toward the staircase. Or more specifically, toward the cupboard beneath it. No, he thought. Surely not. A simple revealing spell confirmed his worst fears. There was a child in that cupboard. A child whose life force was dangerously weak. Move, Nicholas commanded, pushing past Vernon. The large man attempted to block him, only to find himself frozen in place by Perenelle's silent spell. Nicholas knelt before the cupboard door, noting with growing horror the multiple locks on its exterior. A quick charm unlocked them all, and he pulled the door open. The smell hit him first: sickness, unwashed body, and the unmistakable sourness of starvation. Then his eyes adjusted to the darkness, and Nicolas Flamel, who had lived for over 6 centuries and seen countless horrors, felt his heart break. A tiny boy lay curled on a stained mattress, so still that for one terrible moment Nicholas feared they were too late. But then he saw the shallow rise and fall of the child's chest. His skin was sallow and stretched too tight over his bones. Dark bruises marked his visible arm. And when Nicholas gently brushed the matted hair from his forehead, the famous lightning scar stood out in stark relief against the pale skin. "Oh, child," Nicholas whispered. "What have they done to you?" Behind him, he heard Perenelle's sharp intake of breath as she saw the boy. Then her voice, cold as midwinter, addressing the Dursleys. "You kept him in a cupboard. You starved a child. The freak gets what he deserves." Vernon had found his voice again, despite the binding spell. "Always causing trouble with his abnormality. We never wanted him in the first place." Nicholas didn't turn around. He couldn't trust himself not to do something he might regret. Instead, he focused on Harry, casting diagnostic charms that confirmed his worst fears. Severe malnutrition. Dehydration. Multiple poorly healed bones. And signs of prolonged, systematic neglect. "Nellie," he said quietly. "We need to get him to safety. Now." "Yes," she agreed, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Take him. I'll deal with these people." Nicholas carefully gathered the unconscious child in his arms, alarmed at how little he weighed. Harry's head lolled against his shoulder, and Nicholas could feel the stone in his pocket warming even further, as if responding to the boy's proximity. "Don't worry, child," he murmured. "You're safe now." As he carried Harry toward the door, the boy stirred slightly. Fever-bright green eyes opened just a fraction, focusing hazily on Nicholas's face. "Are you real?" Harry whispered, his voice cracked from thirst. "I'm real," Nicholas assured him. "And I'm taking you home." "Not going to bring me back?" The question, so small and frightened, made Nicholas's ancient heart clench. "Never," he promised. "You never have to come back here." Harry's eyes drifted closed again, but Nicholas felt tiny fingers weakly grip the front of his robes. Outside, Nicholas waited while Perenelle finished with the Dursleys. He didn't ask what she'd done to them. Some things were better left unspoken between old partners. When she emerged, her face was composed once more, though her eyes still burned with righteous anger. "Let's go home," she said, placing a gentle hand on Harry's back. "He needs immediate care." With a final look at the perfectly ordinary house that had hidden such cruelty, Nicholas nodded. They stepped behind the hedge again, and with a crack, Privet Drive was left behind. The Flamel estate existed in a space between spaces, an old magic that Nicholas had perfected centuries ago. From the outside, it appeared to be nothing more than a modest country house in a remote part of Devon. Inside, it contained rooms and gardens that couldn't possibly fit in the physical dimensions of the building. They operate directly into what had once been a guest bedroom but had long since been converted into a healing room. Nicholas gently laid Harry on the bed while Perenelle summoned potions from her stores. Malnutrition, dehydration, fever, Nicholas listed as he worked, casting more detailed diagnostic charms. Multiple old injuries, poorly healed. "And look at this, Nellie." He pointed to a dark spot on the magical scan hovering above Harry's chest. "Magical suppression?" Perenelle frowned. "Self-induced?" "I think so." His magic was trying to keep him alive, but in that environment. Nicholas shook his head. He was subconsciously suppressing it to avoid making things worse. Except when he reached out to the stone, Perenelle noted, already working to administer the first of several healing potions. That must have taken incredible desperation. Nicholas nodded grimly, helping to tilt Harry's head so Perenelle could carefully pour a rehydration potion down his throat. We need to call a healer. Andromeda, Perenelle said immediately. She's discreet, skilled, and not directly under Dumbledore's influence. Nicholas nodded agreement and sent his Patronus, a silver fox, with a message to Andromeda Tonks. Then he turned back to help Perenelle with Harry's immediate needs. They worked in practiced synchrony, the result of centuries together. Nicholas spelled nutrients directly into Harry's system while Perenelle applied healing salves to his visible injuries. They vanished his filthy, oversized clothes and replaced them with soft pajamas, both wincing at the prominent ribs and old scars revealed in the process. Those monsters, Perenelle muttered as she gently rubbed a salve onto a particularly nasty bruise on Harry's arm. Albus has much to answer for, Nicholas agreed, his voice tight. He assured us the boy was well protected. Protected? Perenelle's eyes flashed. From external threats, perhaps. But who protected him from his supposed guardians? Before Nicholas could respond, the fireplace flared green, and Andromeda Tonks stepped through, medical bag in hand. Her eyes widened at the sight of the child on the bed. Is that Harry Potter? Nicholas confirmed. And before you ask, yes, we removed him from his relatives' care. With good reason. Andromeda didn't waste time on further questions. She moved to the bed and began her own diagnostic spells, her expression growing grimmer with each result. This child has been systematically abused and neglected, she stated flatly after several minutes of examination. He's severely undernourished, has multiple improperly healed fractures, and shows signs of chronic stress. How long was he in this situation? Since Lily and James died, Perenelle said. Almost 5 years. Andromeda's hand stilled for a moment. 5 years? And no one checked on him? The boy who lived? Apparently not, Nicholas said bitterly. I can heal the immediate issues, Andromeda said, returning to her work. But the long-term damage will take time and care to address. Both physical and psychological. We have time, Perenelle said, exchanging a look with Nicholas. And we can provide the care he needs. You intend to keep him? Andromeda asked, though it wasn't really a question. Yes, Nicholas confirmed. We'll face whatever legal challenges arise, but Harry Potter will not return to those people. Andromeda nodded, unsurprised. Dumbledore won't like it. Dumbledore's preferences became irrelevant the moment he placed this child with abusive relatives, Perenelle stated. For the next hour, they worked together to stabilize Harry's condition. Andromeda administered specialized healing potions while Nicholas maintained monitoring charms. Perenelle sat beside the bed, gently stroking Harry's hair back from his forehead. He's past the immediate danger, Andromeda finally announced. But his recovery will take time. I've left detailed instructions for his care. She looked at the Flamel seriously. You realize what you're taking on? This isn't just any child. He's Harry Potter. He's a boy who needs a home, Perenelle corrected gently. The rest is secondary. Andromeda smiled slightly. I'll check on him tomorrow. And I'll be discreet, but Dumbledore will know soon enough, Nicholas finished. We're prepared for that conversation. After Andromeda left, Nicholas and Perenelle took turns watching over Harry. The stone remained near, still occasionally pulsing with that strange connection. Nicholas studied it thoughtfully, wondering what it meant that this child could call to the stone in a way no one else ever had. Harry slept through the night and most of the following day, his body desperately needed the rest to begin healing. It was early evening when he finally stirred, his eyes fluttering open to take in the unfamiliar surroundings. Hello, Harry," Perenelle said softly, noticing his wakefulness. "You're safe. You're in our home." Harry tensed, pushing himself back against the headboard despite his weakness. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the strange surroundings with obvious fear. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Nicolas Flamel, and my husband is Nicholas. We found you when you were very ill, and we brought you here to help you get better." Harry's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Are you, like me? Can you do strange things?" Perenelle smiled gently. "Yes, Harry. We're magical, just like you. You're a wizard, and I'm a witch." Instead of the wonder or disbelief she might have expected, Harry simply nodded as if this confirmed something he'd long suspected. "Uncle Vernon said there's no such thing as magic," he said. "He punishes me when strange things happen." "Your uncle was wrong," Perenelle said firmly. "Magic is very real. And what happened to you, the punishments, that was wrong too, Harry. Adults should never treat children that way." Harry looked down at his hands, thin fingers picking at the edge of the blanket. "Am I going back there?" "No," came Nicholas's voice from the doorway. He entered carrying a tray with a bowl of broth and some bread. "You will never have to go back there, Harry. You have our word." Harry looked at him suspiciously. "But, where will I go? There's no one who wants me." The matter-of-fact way he said it broke something in Nicholas's ancient heart. He set the tray down and sat on the edge of the bed. "We want you, Harry. If you'd like to stay with us, that is." Harry's eyes widened. "But you don't even know me." "We'd like to," Perenelle said. "And we already know that you're a very brave, very strong boy who has been treated unfairly." Harry still looked disbelieving. "Why would you want me? Aunt Petunia says I'm a burden." "You are not a burden," Nicholas said firmly. "You are a child who deserves love and care, just like every child." He paused, then added gently, "And we have a very large home with no children in it. We think you might be just what this old house needs." Harry looked around the room again, this time taking in the warm colors, the comfortable furniture, the large windows showing a garden beyond. Then his eyes returned to Nicholas and Perenelle, studying them carefully. "You really want me to stay?" he asked, and there was such fragile hope in his voice that Perenelle had to blink back tears. "Very much," she assured him. A small, tentative smile appeared on Harry's face. It transformed him, giving a glimpse of the happy child he might have been, might still become. "Okay," he said simply. Nicholas smiled back, then gestured to the tray. "Now, how about some food? You need to eat to get your strength back, but we'll need to start slowly." Harry nodded eagerly, though he made no move to reach for the tray. Nicholas realized with a pang that the boy was waiting for permission. "Here you are," he said, placing the tray across Harry's lap. "You can eat whenever you're ready." Harry hesitated just a moment longer, then picked up the spoon. He took a small sip of broth, then another, clearly restraining himself from gulping it down. "Slowly," Perenelle encouraged gently. "There's plenty more when you're ready." As Harry ate, Nicholas noticed the stone in his pocket warming again. Without drawing attention to it, he moved slightly away from the bed and observed as the stone's glow seemed to pulse in rhythm with Harry's heartbeat. The connection was still active, though less desperate now that Harry was safe and healing. What did it mean? In all his centuries of research into the stone's properties, Nicholas had never encountered anything like this. The stone didn't form connections with people. It was a tool, a catalyst, a remarkable magical object, but not sentient. Yet it had responded to Harry's distress. Had possibly saved his life by alerting Nicholas and Perenelle. The implications were staggering, but they would have to wait. Right now, the priority was helping Harry heal and adjust to his new life. And, Nicholas thought grimly, preparing for the inevitable confrontation with Albus Dumbledore. It took only 2 days for Dumbledore to arrive. Nicholas felt the ancient wards around their property ripple with the headmaster's presence. He and Perenelle exchanged a glance over breakfast, where Harry was cautiously enjoying a small bowl of porridge. "He's here," Nicholas said unnecessarily. Perenelle nodded. "Harry, dear, would you mind finishing your breakfast in the garden room? There's someone coming to speak with us, and it might be a rather boring adult conversation." Harry looked between them, far too perceptive for a 6-year-old. "Is it about me? About going back?" "Yes, it's about you," Nicholas admitted, seeing no point in lying to the child. "But no, it's not about sending you back. We promised you wouldn't have to return there, and we meant it." Harry still looked uncertain, but he nodded and carefully carried his bowl to the adjoining room, where large windows overlooked a lush garden. Nicholas cast a gentle monitoring charm to keep track of him, then steeled himself as the front doorbell chimed. Albus Dumbledore stood on their doorstep, resplendent in deep purple robes embroidered with silver stars. His long white beard was neatly tucked into a belt, and his blue eyes lacked their usual twinkle. "Nicholas, Perenelle," he greeted them with a slight bow. "I believe we have an urgent matter to discuss." "Indeed we do," Nicholas replied, stepping back to allow Dumbledore entry. "Though perhaps not for the reasons you think." They led Dumbledore to the sitting room, where Perenelle offered tea with cool politeness. The formality wasn't lost on Dumbledore, who accepted the cup with a slight frown. "I understand you've removed Harry Potter from his relatives' care," Dumbledore began once they were seated. "Rescued," Perenelle corrected sharply. "We rescued Harry Potter from what can only be described as criminal neglect and abuse." Dumbledore's eyes widened slightly. "Surely that's an exaggeration." "The Dursleys are his family, Albus," Nicholas interrupted, his voice deceptively calm. "When we found Harry, he was locked in a cupboard under the stairs. He was starving, dehydrated, and feverish. He had multiple old injuries that had never been properly treated. Andromeda Tonks can provide you with the detailed medical report if you require it." Dumbledore's face paled slightly. "I was not aware the situation was so dire. I had monitoring charms in place, clearly ineffective ones," Perenelle said coldly. "Or perhaps you were monitoring only for external magical threats, not considering that the danger to Harry might come from within that house. The blood protection is meaningless if the child dies of neglect behind it," Nicholas finished. "You placed a magical child with people who hate magic, Albus. People who took out that hatred on an innocent boy." Dumbledore set down his teacup, his hand not entirely steady. "I never intended. I believed Petunia would overcome her resentment of Lily for her nephew's sake." "A grave miscalculation," Perenelle said. "Where is Harry now?" Dumbledore asked. "Safe," Nicholas replied. "Here, with us. And here he will remain." Dumbledore's expression grew more serious. "I understand your concern, but there are considerations beyond his immediate comfort. The blood protection at his aunt's home is no longer relevant," Nicholas cut in. "We've already established alternative protections. This house has stood for centuries, Albus. Its wards are among the strongest in Britain, and we've added specific protections for Harry." "And what of his connection to the wizarding world? His heritage?" "Harry Potter has a specific place in our society. A place you seem to have forgotten when you abandoned him to those muggles," Perenelle observed. Dumbledore sighed heavily. "I made a mistake. I acknowledge that. But Harry's placement with his blood relatives was meant to protect him from those who might wish him harm. And now we will protect him," Nicholas said firmly. "Harry will grow up knowing about his parents, about magic, about his place in the wizarding world. But he will do so in a home where he is loved and valued, not treated as a burden or an abomination." "You intend to adopt him?" Dumbledore asked, looking troubled. "We do," Perenelle confirmed. "We've already contacted the necessary authorities." "That may be complicated," Dumbledore said carefully. "As his magical guardian, A position you forfeited when you placed him in an abusive home, Nicholas interrupted. We're prepared to challenge your guardianship in the Wisingamot if necessary, Albus. Are you prepared for the publicity that would generate? For the questions about why the boy who lived was found starving in a cupboard under the supervision of the chief warlock? Dumbledore winced visibly. That won't be necessary. I simply want what's best for Harry. As do we, Perenelle said, her tone softening slightly. Come, Albus. You've known us for decades. Do you truly believe we would not provide Harry with the care and protection he needs? Dumbledore looked between them, then sighed again. No, I don't doubt your intentions or capabilities. But there are prophecies involved, Albus. Harry's destiny is complicated. All the more reason he should have a stable, loving home from which to face that destiny, Nicholas pointed out. We're not ignorant of the dangers, Albus. We know Voldemort isn't truly gone. We know Harry may face challenges in the future. But he'll face them better as a confident, well-adjusted young man than as a broken, abused child. A long silence followed. Finally, Dumbledore nodded slowly. I will not oppose the adoption. But I would ask to remain involved in Harry's life, to help prepare him for what may come. We can discuss appropriate involvement, Nicholas agreed. But understand this, Albus, Harry's well-being comes first. Before prophecies, before your plans, before anything else. May I see him? Dumbledore asked. Nicholas and Perenelle exchanged a glance. Briefly, Perenelle decided. But if he seems uncomfortable, you will leave immediately. They led Dumbledore to the garden room, where Harry was sitting cross-legged on a cushion by the window, carefully feeding crumbs to a small robin that had landed on the sill. He looked up as they entered, his body instantly tensing at the sight of the strange wizard. Harry, Nicholas said gently, this is Professor Dumbledore. He's the headmaster at Hogwarts, the magical school you'll attend when you're older. Harry stood up, the robin fluttering away. Hello, sir, he said quietly, his eyes wary. Dumbledore seemed momentarily taken aback, perhaps by Harry's small size or the caution in his eyes. He recovered quickly, though, and smiled kindly. Hello, Harry. It's very good to see you again, though I doubt you remember me. I knew your parents well. They were exceptional people. Harry's eyes widened slightly. You knew my parents? Indeed I did. Your father was quite the troublemaker in school, always full of mischief. And your mother was one of the brightest witches of her age. Aunt Petunia said they died in a car crash, Harry said hesitantly. And that my dad was a drunk. Dumbledore's smile faltered, and a flash of real anger crossed his face. That is entirely untrue, Harry. Your parents were brave, talented magical people who died protecting you from a very dark wizard. Harry glanced at Nicholas and Perenelle, who both nodded confirmation. We'll tell you the full story when you're ready, Harry, Perenelle assured him. But Professor Dumbledore is right, your parents were heroes. Harry seemed to digest this, then looked back at Dumbledore. Are you going to make me go back to the Dursleys? The directness of the question seemed to catch Dumbledore off guard. No, Harry. If you're happy here with Nicholas and Perenelle, then this is where you should stay. Some of the tension left Harry's small shoulders. I am happy here. They gave me a real bedroom and food and they don't get angry when I ask questions. The simple statement hung in the air, devastating in its implications. Dumbledore closed his eyes briefly, as if in pain. I'm glad to hear that, he said softly. You deserve all those things and more, Harry. I'm sorry you didn't have them before. Harry just shrugged, in that way children do when adults apologize for things beyond their comprehension. Dumbledore looked at him a moment longer, then turned to the Flamels. I believe we understand each other, he said. I'll help facilitate the adoption process. And I would appreciate being kept informed of Harry's progress. Within reason, Perenelle agreed. After Dumbledore left, Harry turned to Nicholas with a frown. He seemed sad. He realized he made a mistake, Nicholas explained, sitting down beside Harry. And he feels bad about it. About putting me with the Dursleys? Yes. Harry considered this. Is he a bad person? No, Perenelle said, joining them. But even good people can make mistakes, especially when they're trying to do what they think is right. Harry nodded, seeming satisfied with this explanation. Then, with the resilience of childhood, he changed the subject entirely. Can I see more magic? Real magic, not hiding and making things happen by accident. Nicholas smiled, relieved to move away from the heavier topics. Of course. He drew his wand and made a series of complex movements. A stream of colorful butterflies burst from the tip, fluttering around the room and making Harry gasp in delight. Will I be able to do that? He asked, eyes wide with wonder. That and much more, Nicholas promised. When you're stronger, we'll start teaching you the basics. Really? I can learn now. I don't have to wait until school. Magical children often learn the fundamentals at home, Perenelle explained. And while there are some things you won't be able to do until you have your own wand at 11, there's plenty to learn before then. Harry's face lit up with the first genuine smile they'd seen from him, bright and eager and filled with possibility. It was, Nicholas thought, like watching the sun break through storm clouds. Later, after Harry had gone to bed in his new room, which he still seemed amazed to have, Nicholas took out the Philosopher's Stone and studied it. The connection to Harry had stabilized but not disappeared. It was as if the stone had recognized something in the boy, something worth protecting. What do you think it means? Perenelle asked, joining him in his study. I don't know, Nicholas admitted. In 600 years, the stone has never behaved this way. It's almost as if it chose him, Perenelle finished. Nicholas nodded slowly. The question is, what for? The next few weeks were a period of adjustment for everyone. Harry slowly gained weight and strength under the Flamel's care, though he remained small for his age. More challenging were the psychological scars from his time with the Dursleys. Harry flinched at loud noises, hoarded food in his room, and apologized constantly for the smallest perceived infractions. But there were improvements too. Harry began asking questions, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence when he realized that not only would he not be punished for curiosity, but that Nicholas and Perenelle genuinely enjoyed answering him. His natural intelligence emerged as he devoured books from their library, particularly those with moving pictures that showed magical creatures and places. And then there was his connection to magic. Once Harry understood that accidental magic wasn't something to fear or suppress, his abilities began to manifest more clearly. Objects would sometimes float toward him when he wanted them. Lights would flicker when he was excited. And most intriguingly, he seemed to have an unusual affinity for potions' ingredients, able to tell which herbs were most potent just by touch. It's extraordinary, Nicholas remarked to Perenelle one evening after Harry had gone to bed. His magical sensitivity is off the charts. And that connection to the stone persists. Perenelle nodded thoughtfully. Have you noticed how he gravitates toward your workshop? Even before you showed it to him. As if he can sense the stone through the walls, Nicholas agreed. I've been thinking about it, and I have a theory. About why the stone responded to him? Yes. The stone represents perfect balance, between elements, between life and death. Harry survived the killing curse, the ultimate imbalance. Perhaps the stone recognizes in him a similar defiance of natural law. Or perhaps, Perenelle suggested, it's simpler than that. The stone preserves life. Harry was dying. The connection formed out of necessity. Nicholas considered this. Possibly. But that doesn't explain why the connection persists now that he's recovering. Perhaps we should ask him about it, Perenelle said. Show him the stone and see how he responds. Nicholas hesitated. The stone is dangerous knowledge for anyone, let alone a child. Harry isn't just any child, Perenelle pointed out. And he already has a connection to it whether we acknowledge it or not. Better he understands what it is than stumbles into its power blindly. After some debate, they agreed. The next morning, after breakfast, Nicholas invited Harry to his workshop, a place the boy had shown immense curiosity about. "This is where I do my alchemy," Nicholas explained as he led Harry inside. "It's a very old branch of magic that combines potions, transfiguration, and elemental work." Harry looked around with wide eyes at the bubbling cauldrons, ancient texts, and shelves of ingredients. "It's brilliant," he breathed. Nicholas smiled, pleased by the boy's enthusiasm. "I want to show you something special, Harry. Something very few people have ever seen." He reached into a pocket of his robes and withdrew a small, cloth-wrapped object. As soon as it was in the open, Harry's eyes fixed on it, even before Nicholas unwrapped the cloth to reveal the stone. Its ruby surface gleamed in the workshop's light, and Harry took an involuntary step toward it. "What is it?" he asked, his voice hushed. "It feels familiar." "This is the Philosopher's Stone," Nicholas explained. "I created it many centuries ago. It's what allowed Perenelle and me to live so long." Harry looked up in surprise. "How old are you?" "Over 600 years, Nicholas admitted. Harry's eyes widened. "Wow." Then he looked back at the stone. "But why does it feel like I know it? Like it's calling to me?" Nicholas exchanged a glance with Perenelle, who had joined them silently. "That's what we'd like to understand, Harry. When you were very ill at your relative's house, you somehow formed a connection with the stone. It's how we found you." Harry frowned, concentrating. "I remember. I was so hungry. And everything hurt. I just wanted someone to come and take me away." His green eyes lifted to meet Nicholas's. "And then I saw a red light, like that stone. And I heard a voice saying they were coming." "The stone has never communicated with anyone before," Perenelle said gently. "Not even Nicholas, who made it." Harry looked worried suddenly. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, not at all," Nicholas assured him quickly. "It's just unusual. Special, even. May I try something, Harry? I'd like to see how the stone responds to you now." When Harry nodded, Nicholas carefully placed the stone in the boy's small hands. The effect was immediate and startling. The stone began to glow, pulses of ruby light emanating from its core. Harry gasped, not in pain but in surprise. "It's warm," he said. "And it's happy." Nicholas and Perenelle stared at each other in amazement. "You can sense its feelings?" Nicholas asked carefully. Harry nodded. It's glad to see me. Like a friend." He looked up, suddenly uncertain. "Is that weird?" "It's unusual," Nicholas said honestly. "But not bad. The stone is a very powerful magical object, Harry. It can transform base metals into gold and produce the elixir of life, which is what keeps Perenelle and me alive and young." Harry looked down at the stone with new respect. "And it helped you find me?" "Yes," Perenelle confirmed. "It formed a connection with you when you needed help most desperately. A connection that seems to still be active." Harry handed the stone back to Nicholas carefully. "Thank you," he said to it, in the matter-of-fact way children sometimes address inanimate objects. To the Flamel's further amazement, the stone gave one final pulse of light before returning to its normal state. "Well," Nicholas said after a moment. "It seems we have a mystery on our hands." He wrapped the stone back in its cloth and secured it in a warded drawer. "But perhaps that's a mystery for another day. How would you like to learn about some basic potion ingredients this morning?" Harry's face lit up. "Yes, please." As Harry enthusiastically sorted herbs under Perenelle's guidance, Nicholas made a mental note to research more deeply into the stone's properties. In 600 years, he thought he knew everything about his creation. But Harry Potter, it seemed, had a way of defying expectations. Summer faded into autumn, and Harry continued to thrive under the Flamel's care. His physical health improved dramatically, though Andromeda Tonks, who continued to check on him regularly, warned that he might always be on the smaller side due to the early malnutrition. More importantly, his confidence grew. He stopped flinching when someone raised a hand near him. He began to ask for food when he was hungry rather than waiting to be offered it. And he started to show flashes of mischief that Nicholas suspected came directly from James Potter's genes. Harry's magical education progressed as well. Though too young for a wand, he learned about magical theory, basic potions, and herbology. His natural affinity for alchemy became increasingly apparent. He could identify the magical properties of stones and metals with uncanny accuracy, and showed remarkable intuition about which ingredients would work well together. "He's a natural," Nicholas told Dumbledore during one of the headmaster's visits. "I haven't seen such aptitude since, well, myself." Dumbledore watched Harry in the garden, where the boy was carefully collecting morning dew from specific flowers under Perenelle's guidance. "It's remarkable how quickly he's adapted." "Children are resilient," Nicholas replied. "And Harry more than most. But he still has nightmares. Still hoards food sometimes. The damage those muggles did won't disappear overnight." "I've been making inquiries," Dumbledore said, his voice carefully neutral. "About the night his parents died." Nicholas raised an eyebrow. "And? There are inconsistencies in the accepted story. Sirius Black's conviction without a trial. Discrepancies in the witness reports. And the question of how Voldemort found the Potters in the first place. You suspect the official story is incomplete." "I suspect many things," Dumbledore admitted. "But proving them is another matter." Nicholas studied his old friend. "Albus, if you're concerned about Harry's safety, I'm concerned about justice," Dumbledore interrupted. "And about Harry having every connection to his parents that he deserves." Nicholas nodded slowly. "Keep me informed of your findings." "Harry has asked about his parents' friends. So far, we've had little to tell him." Their conversation was interrupted by Harry's excited call as he ran up to the terrace, carrying a vial of collected dew carefully in both hands. "Nicholas, look. Perenelle says this is perfect for memory potions." Nicholas smiled warmly at the boy. "Excellent work, Harry. Dew collection requires a steady hand and patience." Harry beamed at the praise, then noticed Dumbledore and gave a polite nod. His initial wariness of the headmaster had faded somewhat over repeated visits, though he remained reserved around most adults who weren't the Flamels. "Hello, Professor Dumbledore." "Hello, Harry. I see you're becoming quite the alchemist's apprentice." Harry grinned. "Nicholas says I have a gift for it. And I like making potions. It's like cooking, but more exciting because things change colors and sometimes smoke." Dumbledore chuckled. "A perspective your future potions professor might appreciate. Though perhaps don't mention the excitement of smoke to him." Harry's eyes lit up. "Will you tell me more about Hogwarts? What are the teachers like?" As Dumbledore obliged with stories about the castle and its inhabitants, Nicholas observed the growing ease between them. It was good for Harry to form connections with others in the magical world, especially those who had known his parents. The boy deserved a wide support network, not just two, admittedly very old, guardians. Later that evening, after Harry had gone to bed, Nicholas found Perenelle in their library, surrounded by ancient texts. "Still researching the stone's connection to Harry?" he asked, settling beside her. She nodded, pushing a strand of silver-streaked hair behind her ear. "I've been reviewing everything we know about Lily Potter's sacrifice. The old magic she invoked to protect Harry. And I think there might be a connection. The stone represents the perfect balance of elements, of life and death. Lily's sacrifice created a powerful protection based in love, the most fundamental force in old magic. Perhaps the stone recognized that protection, that imbalance between Harry's life being preserved when it should have ended. Nicholas considered this. So the stone is, what? Reinforcing that protection? Possibly, Perenelle said. Or perhaps it recognizes in Harry a potential alchemist of rare ability. You've seen how naturally he takes to the work. He does have extraordinary talent, Nicholas agreed. But he's still a child. One who deserves a normal childhood, not the weight of mysterious magical connections or prophecies. Perenelle smiled softly. Says the man who's been teaching him advanced alchemical theory disguised as bedtime stories. Nicholas had the grace to look sheepish. He enjoys them. He adores you, Perenelle corrected. As you do him. We both do. It was true. In the months since they'd rescued Harry, the boy had worked his way firmly into their hearts. After centuries of life together, Nicholas and Perenelle had never chosen to have children, feeling the pain of outliving them would be too great. But Harry had changed that calculation somehow. His presence filled their home with new life, new purpose. The adoption papers came through today, Nicholas said after a moment. Magically and legally, he's now Harry Potter Flamel. Perenelle's eyes shone. Have you told him yet? I thought we might do it together. Tomorrow morning, perhaps. She nodded, then closed the book she'd been reading. Whatever the stone's connection to him means, one thing is certain, Harry was meant to be with us, Nicholas. After 6 centuries, I've learned to recognize when the universe is correcting its own mistakes. Nicholas squeezed her hand. As have I, my love. As have I. Harry woke early the next morning, as had become his habit. The nightmares that had plagued him in his first weeks with the Flamels had decreased, though they hadn't disappeared entirely. Today, however, he'd woken naturally, feeling rested and excited for the day ahead. He dressed quickly in clothes that actually fit him, still a novelty, and made his way downstairs. Nicholas and Perenelle were already in the kitchen, which smelled wonderfully of fresh bread and something sweet. They both looked up with warm smiles as he entered. Good morning, Harry, Perenelle greeted him. Did you sleep well? Harry nodded, climbing onto his usual chair at the table. No bad dreams, he reported proudly. Excellent, Nicholas said, placing a plate of what appeared to be special breakfast pastries before him. We have something important to discuss with you this morning. Harry tensed slightly, old habits dying hard. In his experience, adults who wanted to discuss things usually meant trouble. Perenelle noticed his reaction and quickly sat beside him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. It's nothing bad, dear one. Quite the opposite. Nicholas joined them, placing a roll of parchment on the table. Harry, do you remember when we explained what adoption means? Harry nodded slowly. It's when people choose to make someone their child legally, even though they weren't born to them. That's right, Perenelle confirmed. Well, Nicholas and I have wanted to adopt you since shortly after you came to live with us. We had to work through some legal complications, but yesterday, we received this. She indicated the parchment. Nicholas unrolled it carefully. This document makes it official. If you agree, you would legally be our son, as well as James and Lily's. Your name would be Harry Potter Flamel. Harry stared at the parchment, then at the Flamels, his green eyes wide. You want me to be your son? Really? Very much so, Perenelle said softly. We love you, Harry. We want to be your family in every way that matters. But only if you want it to, Nicholas added quickly. We would never force this on you. Harry was quiet for a long moment, looking down at his hands. Then he looked up, his eyes bright with unshed tears. No one's ever wanted me before, he said simply. The words broke something in both Flamels. Perenelle gathered Harry into a tight hug while Nicholas moved his chair closer, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. We want you, Harry, Perenelle whispered fiercely. Never doubt that. Harry hugged her back tightly, then reached for Nicholas, including him in the embrace. When he finally pulled back, he was smiling through his tears. "I'd like that. Being your son. Having a real family." "Then it's settled," Nicholas said, his own voice rough with emotion. "Welcome to the family, Harry Potter Flamel." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of happiness. Harry examined the adoption certificate with wonder, tracing his new name with a finger. Nicholas explained that while he would always be James and Lily's son, this gave him a new branch of family as well. "It means we can make decisions for you legally," Nicholas explained. "About your education, your health, where you live. No one can take you away. Not even the Dursleys?" Harry asked, a shadow crossing his face. "Especially not them," Perenelle assured him. "They have no claim on you anymore." Harry nodded, satisfied. Then his expression grew thoughtful. "Does this mean I'm going to live for hundreds of years too? Like you?" Nicholas and Perenelle exchanged a glance. They'd expected this question eventually, though perhaps not quite so soon. "No, Harry," Nicholas said gently. "The elixir of life is not something we would ever give to a child. It's a choice that should only be made by an adult who fully understands its consequences. Growing up is a precious gift," Perenelle added. "We wouldn't want you to miss it." "Oh." Harry considered this. "That makes sense, I guess. But, will you be sad when I get old and you don't?" The simple question, asked with a child's directness, struck Nicholas to the core. "That's many, many years away," he said carefully. "And yes, we will be sad. But we will also be grateful for every moment we have with you. That's true of all parents, Harry. The difference is just in the timing." Harry seemed to accept this explanation. "Can we tell people about the adoption?" "Absolutely," Perenelle said. "In fact, we thought you might like to have a small celebration. Perhaps invite Andromeda and her daughter. And Professor Dumbledore, if you'd like." Harry's face lit up. "Could we? And could I meet other magical children too? I've never really had friends before." The admission, made without self-pity but as a simple statement of fact, reminded the Flamels yet again of how much Harry had been denied. They'd been so focused on his physical healing and magical education that perhaps they'd neglected the simple childhood need for playmates. "That's an excellent idea," Nicholas agreed. "There are several magical families with children around your age. We'll arrange some introductions. And a proper celebration," Perenelle added. "To mark this special day." Harry grinned, excitement bubbling over. Then suddenly he jumped up from his chair. "I almost forgot. I made something for you both. Can I go get it?" "Of course," Nicholas said, curious. Harry dashed from the room, returning moments later with a clumsily wrapped package. "I was making it as a thank you for rescuing me," he explained, suddenly shy. "But I think it works as an adoption present too." He handed the package to both of them. Perenelle unwrapped it carefully to reveal a small, rough stone carving. It showed 3 figures holding hands, a tall man, a woman with long hair, and a small boy between them. Despite its childish execution, there was something remarkable about it. The stone seemed to shimmer slightly in the light, catching colors it shouldn't have been able to reflect. "Harry, this is beautiful," Perenelle breathed. "Did you make this all by yourself?" Harry nodded proudly. "I found the stone in the garden. It felt special. And then I just knew what I wanted it to show." He looked down, suddenly unsure. "Do you like it?" "We love it," Nicholas assured him, examining the carving more closely. The stone was indeed unusual, a type of metamorphic rock that typically didn't occur in their garden. More interesting was the faint magical signature it carried. Harry had unconsciously imbued the carving with his own magic, creating something between a work of art and a magical artifact. "It's perfect," Perenelle said, placing it carefully on the center of the table. "A symbol of our family." Harry beamed, pride and happiness radiating from him. It was, Nicholas thought, perhaps the first time they'd seen him truly, completely happy without any shadow of his past hanging over him. Later, after breakfast had been cleared away and Harry had gone to work on his studies, Nicholas examined the carving more closely in his workshop. "Remarkable," he murmured. "He's channeling magic through stone without any training. Without even realizing he's doing it." The stone in its cabinet seemed to pulse in agreement. Nicholas removed it from its protective wrappings and held it near Harry's carving. The two stones resonated together, a harmonic hum filling the air. "Well, old friend," Nicholas said to the stone, "it seems you chose well." He didn't expect an answer, of course. The stone wasn't sentient in any traditional sense. Yet as he watched, a warm glow emanated from its core, not the usual ruby red, but a softer, golden light that reminded him distinctly of Lily Potter's reported final spell. Love magic. The oldest, most powerful magic of all. Perhaps that was the connection after all, not the boy who lived, but the boy who was loved so fiercely that even death couldn't break the bond. Nicholas replaced the stone in its cabinet and picked up Harry's carving. Whatever mysteries lay ahead, whatever challenges Harry might face because of his unique connection to magic, one thing was certain, he would face them as a Potter Flamel, with all the love and protection that entailed. And that, Nicholas thought as he carried the carving back to display in their family room, might make all the difference. Chapter 2, Shadows of the Past. "Now focus, Harry," Nicholas instructed. "Feel the essence of the material. Metal remembers what it once was." 9-year-old Harry Potter Flamel closed his eyes, his small hands hovering over the chunk of lead. After 3 years with the Flamels, he'd grown from the malnourished, frightened child they'd rescued into a healthier, more confident boy. Still small for his age, but with bright eyes that sparkled with intelligence and a quick smile that appeared more frequently as the shadows of his early childhood faded. The lead seemed to hum beneath his palms. Harry breathed deeply, visualizing the transformation Nicholas had described. Not forcing it, alchemical work wasn't about brute force, but coaxing the metal to remember its purer state. "Gold comes from the stars," he murmured, repeating Nicholas's lesson. "All elements heavier than iron were born in supernovas. I'm just reminding it." A warm tingle flowed from his chest, down his arms, and into his fingertips. The hum from the lead intensified. Nicholas watched, not hiding his amazement as a golden sheen spread across the surface of the metal. Not a full transformation, that would require the stone, but a partial shift that most apprentice alchemists couldn't achieve after decades of study. "Extraordinary," Nicholas said as Harry opened his eyes. "You're progressing faster than I anticipated." Harry grinned, examining the partially transformed metal. "Did I do it right?" "More than right. Most adult wizards can't achieve even this level of elemental transfiguration without a wand." Harry's smile faltered slightly. "Is it, because of the stone? Because of our connection?" Nicholas considered the question carefully. They'd never hidden the truth from Harry about his unusual bond with the Philosopher's Stone, though the full implications remained mysterious even after 3 years of research. "Perhaps partially," Nicholas acknowledged. "But don't discount your natural talent. You have an intuitive grasp of alchemy that can't be explained by the stone alone." Harry nodded, looking relieved. Nicholas understood the boy's concern. Harry worried sometimes that his abilities weren't truly his own, but borrowed or gifted through his strange connection to the stone. It was important to Nicholas that Harry understand his own worth, separate from any magical anomalies. "That's enough practice for today," Nicholas said, ruffling Harry's perpetually messy hair. "Perenelle mentioned something about meeting a new friend this afternoon." Harry's face lit up. "Yeah. She found a muggle-born witch my age. Her name's Hermione and she's already experiencing accidental magic, but her parents don't understand what's happening, and Perenelle thought it might help if she met another magical kid before getting her Hogwarts letter in." He broke off, catching his breath. "Sorry. I'm just excited to meet someone my age who's magical." Nicholas chuckled. No need to apologize for enthusiasm. It's good for you to have friends your own age. While Harry had thrived intellectually under their tutelage, both Nicholas and Perenelle worried about his social development. Occasional visits with Andromeda Tonks's daughter Nymphadora, who insisted on being called just Tonks, provided some interaction with a magical child, but at 16, she was more like a big sister than a peer. Harry needed friends his own age, children who wouldn't treat him differently for being the boy who lived or the Flamel's unusual adoptee. Go wash up, Nicholas instructed. They'll be arriving soon. Harry dashed off, his footsteps echoing through the corridors of the old house that had become his home. Nicholas smiled, then turned more serious as he secured the workshop. Times were peaceful, but old habits died hard, and Nicholas had lived long enough to know that peace was often merely the quiet before storms. The Grangers arrived exactly on time, which Nicholas appreciated. The parents, both dentists, according to Perenelle's briefing, appeared slightly overwhelmed but determined to understand their daughter's unexpected abilities. Hermione herself was a small girl with bushy brown hair and large front teeth, clutching a book to her chest like armor. Welcome to our home, Perenelle greeted them warmly. I'm Perenelle Flamel, and this is my husband Nicholas. Dan and Emma Granger, Dr. Granger replied, shaking their hands. And our daughter, Hermione. Thank you for inviting us. This has all been rather surprising. Quite understandable, Nicholas assured them. The discovery that magic is real tends to upend one's worldview. Hermione looked up from her book. I've been reading everything I can find about unexplained phenomena, but none of it explains why books fly off shelves when I'm upset or how my teacher's hair turned blue when she scolded me unfairly. Harry, who had been hanging back slightly, stepped forward with a grin. That's because Muggle books don't know about real magic. I turned my primary school teacher's wig blue once too. Hermione's eyes widened as she focused on Harry. You can do it too. On purpose? Sometimes. I'm still learning control, but Nicholas and Perenelle have been teaching me. I'm Harry, by the way. Harry Potter Flamel. Hermione Granger. She thrust out her hand formally, and Harry shook it. Have you read many books on magic? Real magic books, I mean. Do they explain the underlying principles? Is there a scientific basis? Harry blinked at the rapid-fire questions. Yes, lots, sort of, and kind of. Alchemy is pretty scientific. Want to see my collection? Without waiting for an answer, Harry led Hermione toward the library, already chattering about magical theory. The adults watched them go with bemused smiles. Perhaps we should have tea while they get acquainted, Perenelle suggested, guiding the Grangers to the sitting room. And we can answer any questions you might have about raising a magical child. As the adults settled in, Nicholas could hear the excited voices of the children from the library. He smiled, pleased to see Harry connecting so quickly with someone. The boy had an old soul in many ways, an inevitable result of his early hardships and unconventional upbringing, but it was good to see him acting like an ordinary 9-year-old, eager to share his knowledge and make a friend. Your home is lovely, Emma Granger commented, accepting a cup of tea. Though not quite what I expected from, well, wizards. Perenelle supplied with a smile. We've adapted to changing times. Though I admit some rooms are more traditionally magical than others. How exactly did you find us? Dan Granger asked. Hermione's incidents have been private matters. The Ministry of Magic maintains records of magical occurrences, Nicholas explained, simplifying greatly. Particularly those in Muggle, non-magical, areas. We have a friend in the appropriate department who noted Hermione's significant magical potential and her proximity to our home. And you often reach out to magical children? Emma asked. Not usually, Perenelle admitted. But Harry needs friends who understand his world. Most magical children grow up in wizarding families, but Muggle-born children like Hermione face unique challenges. Like being thought crazy when books start flying around the room, Dan said dryly. Nicholas nodded. Precisely. We thought perhaps we could help prepare Hermione for her eventual entry into the wizarding world, while providing Harry with a friend who won't be interested in him just for his reputation. The conversation continued, with the Flamels carefully explaining Hogwarts, the Statute of Secrecy, and the basics of magical education. The Grangers, though clearly overwhelmed, asked intelligent questions and seemed determined to support their daughter's unexpected gifts. From the library came sudden laughter, Hermione's surprised giggle and Harry's more familiar chuckle. Nicholas and Perenelle exchanged pleased glances. It seemed the introduction was going well. You actually lived in a cupboard? Hermione asked, her eyes wide with horror. Harry nodded, not meeting her gaze. He hadn't meant to share so much about his early life, it had just slipped out while explaining how the Flamels had adopted him. That's horrible, Hermione declared. Your relatives should be in prison. Harry shrugged. They weren't very nice. But I've got a real family now. He quickly changed the subject. Look at this book, it shows how different wand movements affect spell casting. Hermione allowed the diversion, but Harry caught her studying him with thoughtful brown eyes. She was scary smart, he'd figured that out within minutes. Not just book smart like some of the kids he'd known at primary school before the Flamels had arranged for his home education, but clever in a way that saw through things. When do you get a wand? She asked, examining the moving diagrams in the book. When I'm 11, just before Hogwarts. Nicholas has let me try his a few times, but it doesn't work well for me. He says wands choose their wizards. That doesn't sound very scientific, Hermione objected. Harry grinned. Magic often isn't. But that doesn't mean it doesn't follow rules. Nicholas says understanding those rules is what separates great wizards from merely competent ones. And you want to be great? She asked seriously. Harry considered the question. I want to understand, he decided. I want to know why magic works the way it does. Especially. He trailed off, suddenly unsure if he should mention the stone. Especially what? Hermione prompted. Nothing. Harry stood up, suddenly restless. Want to see the garden? There's a wizarding chest set out there. The pieces move themselves and argue about strategy. Hermione's eyes lit up. Really? I play chess with my dad, but the pieces definitely don't move themselves. Harry led her outside, relieved at the successful distraction. He liked Hermione, she asked good questions and didn't treat him like he was strange, but some things weren't his secrets to share. The stone, and his connection to it, fell firmly in that category. The afternoon passed quickly. Harry taught Hermione wizard's chess, where the piece's argumentative nature actually helped her understand the game better, showed her some of his elementary potion ingredients, and explained what he knew about Hogwarts. In return, Hermione told him about her Muggle school, introduced him to several books he'd never heard of, and explained the concept of cinema, which fascinated Harry. So it's like wizard photos, but they tell entire stories? He asked. Exactly. Maybe we can go sometime. There's a new film about a boy who gets lost in New York at Christmas that's supposed to be brilliant. I'd like that, Harry said, realizing he meant it. He'd never had a friend to do normal things with before. When it was time for the Grangers to leave, both children extracted promises from their parents about future visits. Nicholas and Perenelle agreed readily, clearly pleased with the successful introduction. I'm glad you enjoyed yourself, Perenelle said as they waved goodbye to the Grangers' car. Hermione seems like a lovely girl. She's brilliant, Harry confirmed. And she didn't care at all about the boy who lived stuff when I told her. She cared about you, Perenelle corrected gently. The person, not the legend. That's the mark of a true friend. Harry nodded, watching until the car disappeared around the bend. For the first time, he felt a glimmer of excitement about eventually attending Hogwarts. If he could make one friend like Hermione, perhaps he could make others. Perhaps he could have something approaching a normal life, despite his unusual history and abilities. He should have known it wouldn't be that simple. The owl arrived 3 days later, bearing an official-looking letter addressed to Nicholas and Perenelle. Harry, sitting at the breakfast table, watched as Nicholas's expression darkened while reading it. "What is it?" Perenelle asked, setting down her teacup. "The ministry," Nicholas replied, his voice carefully controlled. "It seems Cornelius Fudge wishes to discuss Harry's educational development and social integration." Harry tensed. "Is something wrong with my education?" "Nothing whatsoever," Nicholas assured him. "This is politics, not pedagogy." "They're concerned because you're not in the public eye," Perenelle explained. "The boy who lived, hidden away from wizarding society, it makes certain officials nervous." "I'm not hidden," Harry objected. "I'm just, living my life." "A concept politicians struggle to grasp," Nicholas said dryly, setting down the letter. "Nevertheless, it seems we'll be hosting the Minister for Magic tomorrow afternoon." Harry frowned. "Should I be worried?" "No," Perenelle said firmly. "You've done nothing wrong. Neither have we. This is simply the ministry attempting to assert control over a situation they find unpredictable." "We knew this would happen eventually," Nicholas added. "Fudge has been minister for just over a year now. He's still establishing his authority, and taking an interest in the boy who lived is an easy way to appear engaged with matters of importance." Harry nodded, though he didn't entirely understand the political nuances. Over the past 3 years, he'd gradually learned more about his status in the wizarding world, the famous infant who somehow defeated the darkest wizard in generations. Nicholas and Perenelle had never hidden the truth from him, but they'd been careful not to burden him with the full weight of his celebrity too young. "What should I do when he's here?" Harry asked. "Be yourself," Perenelle advised. "Polite, but not overly formal. Answer his questions honestly, but remember you're not obligated to share everything. Particularly about the stone," Nicholas added. "That remains private family business." Harry nodded seriously. He understood the importance of secrecy regarding the Philosopher's Stone, not just because of its power to create gold and the elixir of life, but because of his unique connection to it. A connection that had grown more nuanced over the years, developing from the initial desperate bond into something more controlled but no less significant. "I'll be careful," he promised. "I won't let him push me around." Nicholas smiled proudly. "We know you won't. You're a Potter Flamel, after all." Minister Cornelius Fudge arrived precisely at 2 o'clock the following day, accompanied by a squat, toad-like woman with a saccharine smile that immediately set Harry's teeth on edge. Fudge himself seemed affable enough, a portly man with a lime-green bowler hat and a blustering manner. Nicholas, Perenelle, Fudge greeted them with forced joviality. "How good to see you both after so long. And this must be young Harry. My word, you do look like your father, though you have your mother's eyes, of course." Harry stepped forward and shook the minister's hand politely. "It's nice to meet you, Minister Fudge. Welcome to our home." "Such manners." Fudge beamed. "This is my senior undersecretary, Dolores Umbridge." Charmed, the woman simpered, though her eyes remained cold as they assessed Harry. "What a special young man you are, Mr. Potter." "Potter Flamel," Harry corrected automatically. He'd become quite attached to his full adoptive name over the past 3 years. Something flickered across Umbridge's face, annoyance, perhaps, but her smile didn't waver. "Of course." "How progressive." Perenelle smoothly intervened. "Let's have tea in the garden, shall we? It's a lovely afternoon." As they settled at the garden table, Harry carefully observed the 2 ministry officials. Nicholas had been teaching him to read people, a skill developed over centuries of navigating political waters. Fudge seemed nervous beneath his bluster, his eyes darting occasionally to Umbridge as if seeking approval. The woman herself kept her attention primarily on Harry, her gaze calculating in a way that made him instinctively want to shield himself. I must say, Fudge began after pleasantries were exchanged, there's been quite a lot of interest in young Harry's whereabouts these past few years. The wizarding public is naturally curious about the boy who lived. Natural curiosity doesn't entitle them to details about a child's private life, Perenelle replied mildly. Harry deserves normalcy, not scrutiny. Quite, Fudge agreed hastily. But there are concerns about his education. His preparation for taking his rightful place in wizarding society. I'm getting an excellent education, Harry spoke up. Nicholas and Perenelle are teaching me magic, history, languages, mathematics, yes, but what about socialization? Umbridge interrupted, her voice syrupy. A growing boy needs to interact with his peers. To develop appropriate relationships. Harry frowned. I have friends. I just spent the afternoon with Hermione Granger yesterday. A Muggle-born, I understand, Umbridge said, her smile tightening. While such associations are acceptable, surely a boy of your standing should be familiar with properly established wizarding families? Nicholas set down his teacup with deliberate care. Harry's standing, as you put it, is that of a 9-year-old boy who has the right to choose his own friends based on their character, not their bloodlines. Of course, Fudge interjected hastily. Dolores merely means that there are certain expectations. Traditions. I'm aware of traditions, Harry said quietly. Nicholas has taught me wizarding history and customs. But he's also taught me to think for myself. How progressive, Umbridge repeated, the word clearly not a compliment in her mouth. Perhaps we should discuss the real purpose of your visit, Minister, Perenelle suggested. Rather than circling the matter. Fudge shifted uncomfortably. Well, yes. The fact is, there are certain parties at the Ministry who feel that Harry's upbringing should include more oversight. Given his importance to our world. Oversight. Nicholas's voice was flat. You mean control. Guidelines, Umbridge corrected sweetly. To ensure he develops appropriately. Perhaps regular assessments by the Department of Education, supervised interactions with approved peers, public appearances at suitable events. Harry felt a chill. They were talking about him as if he were a resource to be managed, not a person. He glanced at Nicholas, who looked as composed as ever, though Harry knew him well enough to recognize the anger in the set of his jaw. Harry is not a Ministry asset, Nicholas stated. He is a child under our legal guardianship, receiving an education that exceeds Ministry standards in every measurable way. No one disputes your qualifications, Umbridge said carefully. But there are modern educational approaches that even someone of your experience might not fully appreciate. Harry had heard enough. I'm happy with my education, he said firmly, surprising the adults with his interjection. I'm learning more than I would in any school. I have friends. I'm healthy and safe. Isn't that what matters? Fudge looked taken aback by the directness of a 9-year-old addressing him so confidently. Well, yes, of course, my boy. Your happiness is certainly a factor, it should be the primary factor, Perenelle interrupted. Harry's well-being has been our only concern since we discovered him starving and abused in the home Albus Dumbledore placed him in. The blunt statement hung in the air. Harry knew it was a calculated move, reminding the Ministry officials that their current concerns about his welfare were suspiciously absent when he'd actually been in danger. An unfortunate situation, certainly, Fudge muttered, looking uncomfortable. But surely you understand our position. Harry Potter is a symbol to our world. His reappearance in wizarding society should be managed appropriately. I'm not a symbol, Harry said quietly. I'm just me. Umbridge's smile became brittle. How charmingly naive. Whether you wish it or not, Mr. Potter, Potter Flamel, Harry corrected again, more firmly this time. Your name carries weight. Your actions reflect on our society. Your upbringing shapes how you will wield your influence. Surely you wouldn't want that influence to be misguided? The threat was thinly veiled, and Harry felt a flare of anger. Before he could respond, Nicholas stood. "I believe this conversation has reached its natural conclusion," he said calmly. "Harry's legal guardianship was established through proper channels. His education exceeds all ministry requirements. If you have specific, legitimate concerns about his well-being, you may submit them in writing for our consideration." Fudge looked startled by the abrupt dismissal, but rallied quickly. "Now see here, Flamel. The ministry has a responsibility. The ministry has no authority over internal family matters when no laws are being broken," Perenelle interrupted smoothly. "As you well know, Minister." Umbridge's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps the laws regarding unusual guardianship arrangements should be reviewed." "Perhaps," Nicholas agreed pleasantly. "Though I imagine such a review might also extend to examining why the ministry failed to verify the boy who live's placement in the first place. I understand there was no magical oversight of his Muggle relatives for nearly 5 years. The implied threat was clear. If the ministry pushed too hard regarding Harry's current situation, the Flamels would ensure that questions were raised about how he ended up abused and neglected under the previous arrangement. Fudge, at least, seemed to understand the precariousness of his position. "Well, this has been a most informative visit. We should be going, Dolores. I'm sure the Flamels will consider our suggestions." "We always appreciate constructive input," Perenelle said diplomatically, though her eyes remained cool. The departure was stiff but polite. As the ministry officials disappeared through the flue, Harry let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That was horrible," he declared. "Especially that Umbridge woman." "Indeed," Nicholas agreed grimly. "Unfortunately, this is unlikely to be their last attempt to exert influence over your life." "Why do they care so much?" Harry asked. "I'm just a kid." Perenelle sat beside him, taking his hand gently. "You're not just any child to them, Harry. You're a symbol, as they said. And symbols can be powerful tools in politics. Or threats, if not controlled," Nicholas added. "Your very existence represents a challenge to certain political narratives. Some would prefer you to be firmly under their influence before you develop your own opinions." Harry frowned, thinking about Umbridge's comments about appropriate friends and proper wizarding families. "They don't like that I'm friends with Hermione because she's Muggle-born, do they?" "Some elements in the ministry value blood purity over character," Perenelle confirmed. "It's an old prejudice, and a dangerous one." "It's stupid," Harry declared. "Hermione's brilliant. Way smarter than most people, magical or not." Nicholas smiled proudly. "And that, Harry, is precisely why certain officials are concerned about your upbringing. You're developing opinions based on your own experiences rather than accepting their prejudices." Harry considered this, then asked the question that had been bothering him since the minister's arrival. "Are they going to try to take me away from you?" "No," Perenelle said firmly. "Your adoption is magically and legally binding. We have powerful allies, and the law is on our side. But they'll keep trying to influence you," Nicholas added honestly. "To shape you into what they want you to be. You'll need to be vigilant, particularly once you start at Hogwarts." Harry nodded seriously. He'd faced worse challenges than pompous officials and their political games. After surviving the Dursleys, he wasn't about to let anyone control his life again. "I'll be careful," he promised. "But I won't let them tell me what to think or who to be friends with." Nicholas squeezed his shoulder approvingly. "That's my boy." The Flamels might have expected the ministry's interest to intensify after that first visit, but what happened next caught them completely by surprise. It began as an ordinary day. Harry was in the garden harvesting moon seeds under the waning quarter moon, the optimal phase for their potency, while Nicholas worked in his study and Perenelle corresponded with a colleague in France. The protective wards around the property hummed with their usual quiet vigilance. Until they didn't. Harry felt it first, a sudden silence where the background magical energy of the wards should have been. He straightened, immediately alert. Nicolas had trained him to recognize magical signatures and to notice when they changed or disappeared. The wards failing meant someone was actively dismantling them, something that should have been nearly impossible. "Nicolas!" Harry called, dropping his basket and running toward the house. "The wards," he didn't finish the sentence. A loud crack echoed through the garden as a figure apparat directly in front of him, a tall man in black robes with a silver mask that gleamed in the moonlight. Death Eater. Harry had seen illustrations in history books. Had heard Nicolas and Perenelle discuss Voldemort's followers. But seeing one in person, blocking his path to safety, was entirely different. Harry reacted instantly, diving sideways as a jet of red light, a stunning spell, shot past where he'd been standing. He rolled behind a garden statue, heart pounding. He had no wand, limited wandless abilities, and an unknown number of dark wizards breaching their home. "Come out, little Potter," a voice called, male, with an aristocratic drawl. "We only want to talk." Harry didn't believe that for a second. He could hear commotion from the house, spellfire and shouting. Nicolas and Perenelle were powerful, but even they could be overwhelmed by surprise and numbers. He needed to think. The stone, if the attackers were after the stone, they'd head for Nicolas's workshop. But Harry suspected it was him they wanted. Him, or information about the stone through him. Either way, he couldn't stay hidden behind a statue. He needed to move. Closing his eyes briefly, Harry focused on his connection to the stone. Over the years, he'd learned to access it deliberately rather than just in moments of desperate need. He couldn't draw power from it exactly, but he could strengthen his own innate magic through their bond. A warm sensation spread through his chest, familiar and comforting. When he opened his eyes, his vision seemed sharper, his senses more acute. He could feel the Death Eater moving around the garden, searching for him. "Accio Harry Potter," the man tried, his voice tinged with impatience. Harry felt a slight tug, easily resisted. Summoning charms didn't work well on living beings with their own magic, especially when they were actively resisting. Nicolas had taught him that. Taking advantage of the failed spell, Harry darted from his hiding place toward a different section of the garden. If he could reach the hedge maze, he'd have a better chance of evading his pursuer long enough for Nicolas and Perenelle to deal with whatever was happening in the house. "There you are." Harry ducked instinctively as another spell, sickly yellow this time, flew over his head. He zigzagged between flower beds, making himself a difficult target. Ahead, the entrance to the hedge maze beckoned, dark and potentially dangerous, but familiar territory to Harry and confusing to an intruder. He was halfway there when a second masked figure appeared, cutting off his escape route. "Careful, Avery," the new arrival cautioned. "We need him intact." "He's slippery for a brat," the first Death Eater, Avery, complained. "Just stun him and be done with it." The second Death Eater raised his wand, but Harry was already changing direction, diving beneath a low-hanging willow tree whose branches might disrupt spell trajectories. His mind raced. 2 Death Eaters in the garden, unknown numbers in the house. Direct confrontation was suicide. Then he remembered, the emergency port key. Nicolas had created it after Harry's rescue from the Dursleys, insisting that Harry carry it at all times. It would transport him directly to a secure location where he could contact help. Harry reached for the small stone in his pocket, only to find it strangely unresponsive. Cold dread washed over him. Anti-port key wards. Of course they'd thought of that. "No escape, Potter," the second Death Eater called, stalking closer to the willow. "Make this easy on yourself. Our master simply wishes to speak with you." Their master? Voldemort was supposed to be gone, defeated. Unless. Harry backed away, deeper into the willow's curtain of branches. He needed to buy time. "Who's your master?" he called, trying to keep his voice steady. "Voldemort's dead." Both Death Eaters flinched at the name, confirming Harry's suspicion that these were indeed Voldemort's followers. "You'll find out soon enough," Avery snarled, slashing his wand. The willow branches parted violently, exposing Harry's position. Harry acted on instinct. Drawing deep on his connection to the stone, he thrust his hand toward the ground and released the pent-up magical energy. The earth beneath the Death Eater's feet erupted, sending dirt and rocks flying upward with explosive force. It wasn't a calculated spell, just raw elemental magic channeled through desperation and his bond with the stone. But it was effective. Both men were knocked backward, momentarily disoriented by the unexpected wandless magic from a 9-year-old. Harry didn't wait to see if they recovered. He bolted toward the house, hoping to find Nicholas or Perenelle, or at least a more defensible position. He made it halfway across the garden when a spell hit him from behind, not a stunner, but something that wrapped magical bindings around his legs, sending him crashing to the ground. Harry struggled, but the bindings tightened painfully. "Impressive display," a new voice commented. A third Death Eater emerged from the shadows near the house, his mask slightly different from the others, more ornate, marking him as higher ranking. "The boy has power, undisciplined though it may be." Harry glared up at the approaching figure, still fighting against the magical restraints. "Let me go." "I think not." The Death Eater knelt beside Harry, studying him with cold eyes visible through the mask slits. "You've caused us quite a lot of trouble, Mr. Potter. Breaking through those wards was challenging. What do you want?" Harry demanded, trying to hide his fear beneath defiance. The man tilted his head slightly. "Initially, simply to assess the boy who lived, see what all the fuss was about. But now—" He reached out, gripping Harry's chin with gloved fingers. "Now I'm rather interested in how a child your age managed that bit of wandless elemental magic." Harry jerked his face away. "My guardians will stop you. The ancient alchemist and his wife." The man sounded amused. "They're rather occupied at the moment. 6 of my associates are ensuring they stay that way. 6 more Death Eaters inside. Even Nicholas and Perenelle would struggle against those odds in a surprise attack." Harry felt cold fear spreading through him, but refused to show it. "What do you want?" he repeated, stalling for time. The Death Eater cast another spell, binding Harry's arms to his sides. "Let's start with how you knew we were coming." The wards fell silently. "You shouldn't have had any warning." "I felt it," Harry said truthfully. There was no point lying about something so basic. "Interesting. Most adult wizards wouldn't notice ward fluctuations without specific detection charms." The man studied him more intently. "What else can you feel, I wonder?" Before Harry could respond, a massive explosion rocked the house, sending a plume of multicolored smoke into the night sky. The Death Eater turned toward it, momentarily distracted. Harry seized the opportunity. Focusing again on his connection to the stone, he visualized the bindings breaking. It wasn't a spell so much as a pure desire channeled through magic, a rejection of the restraints. To his surprise and relief, the bindings shimmered and weakened just enough for him to squirm one arm free. The Death Eater turned back, quickly noticing Harry's partial escape. "Resourceful," he commented, raising his wand again. But, whatever he'd been about to say was interrupted by a brilliant flash of silver light that slammed into him from behind, sending him flying across the garden. Nicolas Flamel emerged from the smoke surrounding the house, his face streaked with soot but his wand steady. "Harry," he called. "Are you all right?" "Bound," Harry called back, still struggling against the weakened but persistent magical restraints. Nicholas strode forward, deflecting a curse from one of the other Death Eaters with almost casual ease. His normal gentle demeanor had vanished, replaced by the focused intensity of a wizard with centuries of magical experience. With a complex movement of his wand, Nicholas dissolved the bindings holding Harry. "Inside, now," he commanded. Perenelle secured the east wing. Harry scrambled to his feet, looking anxiously toward the house. "How many?" no time, Nicholas interrupted, blocking another spell. Go, Harry. Harry ran toward the house, Nicholas covering his retreat. As he reached the terrace, he glanced back to see his adoptive father dueling two Death Eaters simultaneously, his wand a blur of movement. A third figure, the leader who had questioned Harry, was rising from where Nicholas's spell had thrown him, reaching inside his robes. Nicholas, behind you! Harry shouted. Nicholas spun, just in time to see the Death Eater withdrawing not a wand, but a small silver object that gleamed in the moonlight. Lucius sends his regards, Flamel, the Death Eater called, and activated what Harry suddenly realized was a portkey. But instead of transporting the Death Eater away, it seemed to trigger something else, a cascading failure in the property's remaining wards. The night air filled with the sound of shattering glass as magical barriers collapsed. Nicholas's face paled. Harry, run! To the stone! Harry didn't hesitate, bolting inside the partially damaged house. He knew what Nicholas meant, they prepared for this possibility. If the main wards fell completely, the stone would need additional protection. And despite the danger to himself, Harry was part of that protection due to his unique bond with it. He raced through familiar corridors, some now showing damage from spell fire. Twice he had to dodge fallen debris. As he neared Nicholas's workshop, he heard sounds of fighting, Perenelle's voice calling out spells, other voices responding with curses. The workshop door was ajar, splinters of wood suggesting it had been forcibly breached. Harry slowed, approaching cautiously. Inside, he could see Perenelle dueling two Death Eaters at once, her movements graceful despite her apparent exhaustion. The cabinet where the stone was usually kept stood open and empty. Harry's heart sank. Had they taken it? But then he felt it, the familiar warm pulse of the stone's energy, coming from behind a section of wall that appeared intact but actually concealed a hidden compartment. The emergency protocol had worked. When the wards began failing, the stone had been automatically transferred to its secondary safeguard. Perenelle caught sight of him in the doorway. Harry, no, she called, fear flashing across her face. Get back. Too late, Harry realized his mistake. He'd led the Death Eaters right to the stone by coming here. And worse, one of them had noticed him, a tall figure breaking away from the duel to approach the doorway where Harry stood frozen. There's the boy, the Death Eater called to his companion. And if he's here, so is the stone. Harry backed away, but the Death Eater was faster, lunging forward and grabbing his arm in a painful grip. Where is it, boy? Where's the Philosopher's Stone? I don't know what you're talking about, Harry gasped, struggling against the iron grip. The Death Eater raised his wand to Harry's throat. Don't play games. Flamel sent you to secure it. Where? His question was cut short as Perenelle's spell caught him squarely in the back. The Death Eater crumpled, his grip on Harry loosening. Harry stumbled away, only to feel the unmistakable pulse of the stone growing stronger, more insistent. It was calling to him, as it had that first desperate night at the Dursleys. But this time, it wasn't seeking to help him, it was warning him. Harry turned toward the hidden compartment, just in time to see the wall shimmer as concealment charms failed. The elaborate magical locks Nicholas had designed were being systematically dismantled by the lead Death Eater, the one who had questioned Harry in the garden. Stop! Harry shouted, knowing it was futile but unable to remain silent. The Death Eater turned, his mask now removed to reveal platinum blonde hair and aristocratic features. Ah, the boy returns. Just in time to witness history. Harry recognized him from photos in the Daily Prophet, Lucius Malfoy, supposedly reformed Death Eater, Ministry insider, and one of the wealthiest wizards in Britain. The man Nicholas and Perenelle had specifically warned Harry about as someone who might seek the stone. You don't understand what you're doing, Harry said, desperately stalling. Where was Nicholas? Where was Perenelle? He glanced around and saw her slumped against the far wall, bleeding from a wound on her temple. The second Death Eater lay motionless nearby, they had taken each other out. I understand perfectly, Malfoy replied, turning back to the weakening security charms. The Philosopher's Stone is wasted on Flamel's humanitarian pursuits. Immortality and infinite wealth should serve greater ambitions. Harry felt the stone's presence growing more agitated as Malfoy worked. It was responding to the threat, but it couldn't protect itself. That was why it was calling to Harry, its only living connection. Without conscious thought, Harry stepped forward, placing himself between Malfoy and the failing hidden compartment. "I won't let you take it." Malfoy laughed, genuinely amused. "And how exactly will you stop me, child? You're wandless, untrained, and alone." "I'm not alone," Harry said, and reached back with his mind, embracing the connection to the stone that had been part of him for 3 years. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Power surged through Harry, not from within but from without, the stone feeding its energy into him as if he were a conduit. It wasn't like his earlier wandless magic in the garden, that had been his own ability enhanced by the connection. This was different, this was the stone itself acting through him. Harry's eyes blazed with ruby light. The air around him shimmered with heat. Malfoy stepped back, sudden uncertainty replacing his confident sneer. "What is this?" he demanded. "What are you doing?" Harry couldn't have answered if he wanted to. The stone's energy was too vast, too ancient for him to fully control. It moved through him with purpose, seeking to protect itself and, by extension, Harry. The floor beneath Malfoy's feet began to transform, stone to gold to liquid to gas and back again, cycling through alchemical transformations too fast to track. The Death Eater lost his balance, falling backward as his wand clattered from his hand. "Impossible," Malfoy gasped, staring at Harry with a mixture of fear and awe. No child could channel such power. Harry felt the stone's energy receding, having accomplished its immediate goal of disarming the threat. But the connection had taken its toll. Exhaustion crashed over him in waves, his vision blurring at the edges. He swayed on his feet, fighting to remain conscious. Through the haze, he saw Malfoy recovering his composure, reaching for his fallen wand. Harry knew he couldn't withstand another surge of the stone's energy, but he also couldn't let Malfoy take it. Just as Malfoy's fingers closed around his wand, Nicolas appeared in the doorway, his robes torn and bloody but his eyes burning with cold fury. "Step away from my son, Malfoy," he commanded, his wand leveled at the Death Eater's heart. Malfoy hesitated, clearly calculating his odds. His gaze flickered between Nicolas, the now visible stone in its partially exposed hiding place, and Harry's swaying form. "This isn't over, Flamel," he finally said, backing toward a shattered window. "The Dark Lord will return, and when he does, both the stone and the boy will be his." With a flick of his wand, Malfoy shattered the anti-apparition wards that had been weakened by the earlier cascade failure, and disappeared with a crack. Harry felt his knees buckle as the last of the stone's borrowed energy left him. Nicolas caught him before he hit the floor, cradling him like he had when Harry was 6. "I'm sorry," Harry mumbled, fighting to stay awake. "I led them right to it." "Shoo," Nicolas soothed. "You did exactly as you should have. The stone is safe. So are you. Perenelle will be fine." Nicolas adjusted his grip to carry Harry more securely. "She's faced worse in her time. We all have." As darkness closed in around Harry's vision, his last conscious thought was that the stone had gone quiet in his mind, not absent, but calm again. "Safe, for now." But Malfoy's words echoed ominously, "The Dark Lord will return." Harry woke in his own bed, sunlight streaming through the curtains. For a disoriented moment, he wondered if the Death Eater attack had been just another nightmare. Then the soreness in his muscles and the lingering magical exhaustion confirmed the truth, it had been very real. He pushed himself to a sitting position, wincing at the effort. His room appeared untouched by the violence that had affected other parts of the house, a small pocket of normalcy preserved. The door opened quietly, and Perenelle entered, a tray floating beside her. Her temple bore a healing cut, but otherwise she seemed recovered from her injuries. You're awake, she said, smiling warmly. How do you feel? Tired, Harry admitted. And sore. Like I've been running for hours. Magical exhaustion, Perenelle confirmed, setting the tray across his lap. It contained a light breakfast and a potion Harry recognized as a restorative. What you did with the stone was unprecedented. Harry sipped the potion, grimacing at its bitter taste. I didn't know what I was doing. It was like the stone took over. Not quite, Nicholas said, entering the room. He looked weary but uninjured. The stone has no consciousness as we understand it. What happened was more like resonance. Your connection allowed you to channel its energy, but your intent guided that energy. My intent was to stop Malfoy, Harry said. Precisely. And the stone responded to that intent because it aligned with its own nature, preservation, protection. Nicholas sat on the edge of the bed. But it was dangerous, Harry. The human body isn't meant to channel that kind of power, especially not a young one still growing. Harry nodded, sobered by Nicholas's serious tone. I didn't have much choice. No, you didn't, Perenelle agreed. And you acted bravely. But we need to better understand this connection and how to manage it safely. Did they get away? The Death Eaters? Harry asked. Most of them, Nicholas confirmed grimly. Lucius Malfoy escaped, as did several others. 2 were captured by Aurors who responded to our emergency signal, though I doubt they'll reveal much under questioning. Why did they come? Why now? Nicholas and Perenelle exchanged a glance that Harry had learned to recognize. They were deciding how much to tell him. After his ordeal, Harry found the hesitation frustrating. I think I've earned the full truth, he said quietly. They came for me as much as for the stone. Nicholas sighed. Yes, they did. And you're right, you deserve to know why. He paused, gathering his thoughts. We believe Lucius Malfoy recently acquired certain dark artifacts from Voldemort's era. One of these items may have reacted to your growing connection with the stone. Reacted how? Harry asked. By revealing your location, or at least confirming it, Perenelle explained. These objects would have been linked to Voldemort himself, and Voldemort was obsessively interested in immortality, the stone's primary power. But Voldemort's gone, Harry said, though something in their expressions made him uncertain. Is he? Nicholas asked quietly. That's the question, isn't it? Most believe he died the night he attacked you and your parents. But there were inconsistencies. No body was ever found. And some of us who studied dark magic throughout the centuries recognized the signs of something more sinister than a simple killing curse backfiring. Harry felt a chill that had nothing to do with his physical condition. You think he's still out there? Voldemort? In some form, Nicholas confirmed. Diminished, bodiless perhaps, but not truly gone. And his followers, or at least the most devoted ones, know or suspect this as well. Which is why they wanted both you and the stone, Perenelle added. You, because of your connection to Voldemort through that scar. The stone, because it could potentially restore him to a body. Harry unconsciously touched the lightning scar on his forehead. He'd always known it was more than just a mark, it occasionally prickled with pain, especially when he had nightmares about green light and high, cold laughter. But the idea that it somehow connected him to Voldemort was horrifying. Is that why I can sense the stone? Because of Voldemort? The thought made him feel sick. No, Nicholas said firmly. Your connection to the stone is entirely different, pure where his would be corrupted. We believe it has more to do with your mother's sacrifice and the ancient magic it invoked. Harry nodded, slightly relieved but still troubled. So what happens now? Will they try again? Not immediately, Perenelle said. The attack was costly for them, 2 captured, others injured. And Malfoy's direct involvement means he'll need to lie low for a while. But they will try again eventually, Nicholas acknowledged. Which is why we need to take additional precautions. Like what? For one, we're strengthening the wards to unprecedented levels, Nicholas explained. What happened last night was a coordinated attack that exploited a specific vulnerability, one that no longer exists. But more importantly, Perenelle continued, we believe it's time to reconsider the stone's location. Keeping it here, with you, may be too dangerous for both. Harry frowned. You want to move the stone? But where? Hogwarts, Nicholas said. Under Albus Dumbledore's protection, with additional safeguards that Perenelle and I will design. It's one of the most magically protected locations in Britain, and it would separate the stone from you enough to make a coordinated attack on both nearly impossible. But won't that weaken our connection? Harry asked, surprised by how much the thought bothered him. The stone had been a constant presence in his life for 3 years, a comforting background hum of magic that had become part of how he understood the world. Not significantly, Perenelle assured him. Distance affects the intensity but not the fundamental bond. And it may be healthier for you to have some separation, to develop your own magic without its influence. Harry considered this, then nodded slowly. When would you move it? Soon. Within the month, Nicholas said. Once the wards here are fully restored and the proper preparations made at Hogwarts. Harry picked at his breakfast, digesting everything they'd told him. Voldemort possibly still alive in some form. Death Eaters actively seeking both him and the stone. His scar connecting him somehow to the dark wizard who had murdered his parents. It was a lot for a 9-year-old to process, even one raised by 600-year-old alchemists. I want to learn more, he finally said, looking up with determination. About defense, about Voldemort, about my parents and what happened that night. If they're coming for me, I need to be prepared. Nicholas and Perenelle exchanged another glance, but this time it wasn't about withholding information, it was recognition of Harry's maturity in facing a difficult situation. You're right, Nicholas agreed. Your education needs to expand accordingly. Defense against the dark arts, more advanced wandless techniques, a clemency to protect your mind. And more about your parents, Perenelle added. It's time you knew more about James and Lily, not just as heroes who died, but as the people they were in life. Harry nodded gratefully. Thank you. For telling me the truth. For not treating me like I'm too young to understand. You've never been too young to deserve honesty, Nicholas said, squeezing Harry's shoulder gently. Just young enough that we wanted to preserve some innocence while we could. But after last night. I'm not a little kid anymore, Harry finished quietly. You're still a child, Perenelle corrected, brushing his perpetually messy hair from his forehead with tender fingers. And entitled to all the protection and care that entails. But you're also a Potter Flamel, facing extraordinary circumstances with extraordinary courage. We'll help you navigate both realities. Harry managed a small smile. When can we start? The new lessons. Once you've fully recovered from magical exhaustion, Nicholas said. Which means at least 3 days of rest and restoration potions. Harry started to protest, but the fatigue weighing his limbs and the lingering headache from channeling the stone's energy made the wisdom of Nicholas's prescription clear. Instead, he asked a different question. Could you tell me about my parents now? Something I don't already know. Perenelle smiled warmly. Of course. Did you know your father could transform into a stag? He was an animagus, a wizard who could take animal form at will. Harry's eyes widened. Really? That's brilliant. Could my mum do it too? No, but she had her own exceptional talents, Nicholas said, settling more comfortably on the bed. She was a natural at charms and potions, much like you. In fact, she and Severus Snape, who now teaches potions at Hogwarts, were potions partners in their early years at school. My mum was friends with a Hogwarts professor? Harry asked, intrigued. It's complicated, Perenelle said carefully. They had a falling out in their 5th year. But that's a story for another day. For now, let me tell you about how your parents finally got together in their 7th year. As Perenelle shared stories about James and Lily Potter, Harry felt some of the tension from the attack melting away. Yes, there were dangers ahead, Death Eaters, Voldemort's possible return, the complex politics of the wizarding world. But he had his family, he had knowledge, and he had the courage that seemed to be his inheritance from both Potter and Flamel lines. Whatever came next, he wouldn't face it alone. Hundreds of miles away, in a dark forest in Albania, something stirred. A shadow that was less than ghost but more than memory, sensing a distant magical surge of familiar energy. The Philosopher's Stone had awakened, had fought, had protected itself. And it had done so through a most unexpected vessel, the boy who should have died by his hand 8 years ago. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, connected. It was an unforeseen development, intriguing and infuriating in equal measure. The shadow that had once been Lord Voldemort couldn't smile in his formless state, but satisfaction coursed through what remained of his consciousness. His faithful servants had failed to secure either the boy or the stone, but they had confirmed both existed, both were accessible. And most importantly, they had verified that the connection between the two was real. Knowledge was power. And with this knowledge, the path to his resurrection became clearer. The boy who lived would face him again. The stone would be his. It was only a matter of time. The shadow drifted deeper into the forest, patience born of necessity settling around it like a cloak. 2 years until the boy would enter Hogwarts. 2 years to plan, to prepare, to arrange the pieces perfectly. 2 years until Harry Potter, the Philosopher's Stone, and Lord Voldemort would meet again. Chapter 3, The Stone's Awakening. Harry stood in front of his bedroom mirror, trying and failing to flatten his perpetually messy hair. In just a few hours, he'd be boarding the Hogwarts Express as a proper first-year student. His trunk was packed, his new wand, holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple, tucked safely in its holster on his wrist. Nervous? Nicholas asked, appearing in the doorway. Harry met his guardian's eyes in the mirror. Yeah. But excited too. It's just. He trailed off, unsure how to articulate the swirl of emotions churning inside him. You're worried about being Harry Potter rather than Harry Potter Flamel, Nicholas finished for him. Sort of. Harry turned around. For 5 years, I've just been, me. Your apprentice. Perenelle's student. But at Hogwarts. You'll be the boy who lived, Nicholas nodded. A legend before you've even taken your first class. Exactly. Harry ran a hand through his hair, undoing his attempts to tame it. What if I can't live up to what everyone expects? Nicholas crossed the room and placed his hands on Harry's shoulders. You don't need to live up to their expectations, Harry. Those are based on stories and speculation, not reality. Just be yourself, the bright, curious, kind young man we've raised you to be. And if that's not enough, then they don't deserve you, Nicholas said simply. Remember what we discussed about fame? It's a reflection, not reality, Harry recited. What people see in me says more about them than about me. Precisely. Nicholas squeezed his shoulders. And you won't be alone. You'll have Hermione. Professor Dumbledore knows the truth of your upbringing. And the stone will be there too, Harry finished. The knowledge was comforting. Though the Philosopher's Stone had been moved to Hogwarts months ago, Harry could still sense it, a distant hum rather than the immediate presence he'd grown accustomed to, but reassuring nonetheless. Speaking of which, Nicholas said, his tone shifting to something more serious, we need to discuss the stone's security one final time before you leave. Harry nodded, immediately alert. Over the past 2 years, his education had expanded beyond normal magical studies to include detailed defensive training. The Death Eater attack had changed everything, transforming Harry from merely a gifted student to one being prepared for potential future conflicts. The stone is hidden within Hogwarts using multiple layered protections, Nicholas continued. Albus and several professors have contributed obstacles, and Perenelle and I have added our own. You should be able to sense its general location through your connection, but the specifics of its protection are deliberately kept from you. For my own safety, Harry said, having heard this explanation before. And for the stones, Nicholas confirmed. If anyone were to extract information from your mind, they would get only vague impressions, not concrete details. The implication was clear. If Voldemort or his followers captured Harry, they wouldn't be able to use him to access the stone directly. The occlumency training Harry had received over the past 2 years would help protect his mind from invasion, but Nicholas and Perenelle had taken no chances with information security. Remember, Nicholas said, your priority should always be your own safety. Not the stones. If you sense danger, alert Dumbledore immediately and stay away, Harry finished. I know, Nicholas. Good. Nicholas's expression softened. I know we've placed heavy burdens on young shoulders, Harry. But it's precisely because we love you that we've prepared you as best we can. Harry nodded, understanding completely. The Flamels had never sheltered him from difficult truths, but they'd always balanced knowledge with care, preparation with protection. Now, Nicholas said, his tone lightening, I believe Perenelle has prepared a special breakfast for your departure. Something about your favorite treacle pancakes. Harry grinned, momentarily forgetting his nerves about Hogwarts. Race you downstairs. Platform 9 3/4 was chaos, a whirlwind of students, parents, trunks, owls, and tearful goodbyes. Harry stepped through the barrier between platforms 9 and 10 with Nicholas and Perenelle on either side of him, momentarily overwhelmed by the noise and activity. There's the train, Perenelle said, pointing to the gleaming scarlet Hogwarts Express. Steam billowed from its engine, adding to the magical atmosphere. Harry clutched the handle of his trunk with one hand and Hedwig's cage with the other. The snowy owl, a birthday gift from the Flamels, hooted softly, seemingly as overwhelmed as Harry by the crowded platform. Harry! Harry, over here! Turning toward the voice, Harry spotted Hermione Granger waving enthusiastically from a few yards away. Her parents stood beside her, looking slightly bemused by the magical surroundings. Hermione! Harry called back, weaving through the crowd toward his friend. Over the past 2 years, they'd grown close, with regular visits and shared excitement about eventually attending Hogwarts together. Can you believe we're finally going? Hermione asked breathlessly when he reached her. I've memorized all our course books, of course, but there's so much practical application we couldn't try at home without wands. I can't wait for Charms class, Professor Flitwick is supposed to be brilliant. And Transfiguration with Professor McGonagall. Though I hear she's incredibly strict. Harry grinned as Hermione continued her excited monologue. Some things never changed. Breathe, Hermione, he finally interrupted, laughing. We've got a whole year for all of that. She blushed slightly. Sorry. I'm just excited. Me too, Harry assured her. The adults exchanged greetings while the children talked. Harry noticed several people on the platform doing double takes as they passed, whispering behind their hands. Word was spreading that Harry Potter was on the platform. We should find seats, Hermione said, also noticing the growing attention. Before it gets worse. Harry nodded gratefully. After quick but emotional goodbyes to the Flamels and the Grangers, they boarded the train, dragging their trunks down the corridor in search of an empty compartment. This one's just got one person, Hermione said, sliding open a door to reveal a compartment with a solitary red-headed boy inside. Mind if we join you? Harry asked. The boy looked up and shrugged. Sure, go ahead. They stowed their trunks and sat down, Hedwig's cage on the seat beside Harry. The red-headed boy eyed them curiously. I'm Ron Weasley, he offered. First year. Hermione Granger, Hermione replied. And this is, Harry Potter, Harry interrupted, preferring to introduce himself. Though I actually go by Potter Flamel now. Ron's eyes widened dramatically. Blimey. You're really him. Have you got the. He gestured vaguely toward his forehead. Harry sighed internally but lifted his fringe to reveal the lightning scar. Wicked, Ron breathed. Wait, did you say Flamel? Like, Nicolas Flamel? The alchemist? He's my adoptive father, Harry confirmed. He and Perenelle took me in when I was 6. Ron stared. But he's like ancient, isn't he? Hundreds of years old. 665, Harry said, amused by Ron's reaction. But he doesn't look a day over 60. The elixir of life, Hermione explained importantly. Produced by the Philosopher's Stone. It grants immortality and eternal youth to the drinker. I know what it does, Ron said, slightly defensively. My dad works at the ministry. He's mentioned Flamel before. Harry tensed slightly. What did he say? Ron seemed to notice Harry's change in demeanor. Nothing bad. Just that Flamel consults sometimes on really complex magical artifacts. Dad works in the misuse of Muggle artifacts office, but he hears things from other departments. Harry relaxed. Sorry. It's just, the ministry hasn't always been supportive of my guardianship situation. Politics, Hermione said dismissively. Some people at the ministry, particularly in Fudge's immediate circle, wanted more control over Harry's upbringing. Ron nodded understandingly. Dad says Fudge is a bit of a prat who listens too much to people with gold. No offense if your family supports him or something. None taken, Harry assured him. The Flamels definitely don't. The conversation shifted to less politically charged topics, Quidditch, which Ron loved and Hermione found barbaric, the 4 Hogwarts houses. Ron insisted Gryffindor was the only acceptable option, while Hermione thought Ravenclaw sounded ideal, and what classes might be like. My brothers Fred and George say the first week is when professors figure out who to watch, Ron said. You know, who's going to be trouble and who's going to be top of the class. Where do you think you'll fall? Hermione asked. Ron shrugged. Somewhere in the middle, I expect. I'm no Percy, he's my prefect brother, total swat, but I'm not a troublemaker like the twins either. I suspect you'll surprise yourself, Harry said, liking Ron's straightforward nature. Most people are capable of more than they think. That sounds like something Dumbledore would say, Ron remarked. You know him well, living with Flamel and all. He visits sometimes, Harry said carefully. He's complicated. Brilliant but not always right. Muggles saying about being too smart for your own good, Hermione noted. Sometimes people who see the big picture miss important details right in front of them. The compartment door slid open before Ron could respond, revealing a pale, blonde boy flanked by 2 larger boys who resembled bodyguards more than students. They're saying Harry Potter's in this compartment, the blonde boy announced without preamble. His eyes fixed on Harry immediately. That's you, is it? Harry felt a chill of recognition. The boy's pointed face and platinum hair marked him unmistakably as a Malfoy, likely Lucius Malfoy's son. The Death Eater who had led the attack on the Flamel estate 2 years earlier. Yes, Harry answered cautiously. And you are? Malfoy. Draco Malfoy. Ron gave a slight cough that might have disguised a snigger. Draco's eyes narrowed. Think my name's funny, do you? No need to ask who you are. Red hair, hand-me-down robes, you must be a Weasley. His tone made the name sound like an insult. He turned back to Harry. You'll soon find some wizarding families are better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there. He extended his hand, but Harry didn't take it. 2 years of intensive training in reading people and situations had Harry's instincts on high alert. This wasn't just schoolboy posturing, Draco Malfoy was making a deliberate political overture, almost certainly at his father's instruction. I think I can tell the wrong sort for myself, thanks, Harry said coolly. And it's Potter Flamel, actually. Draco's pale face flushed pink. Flamel. That ancient relic who's hoarding the, he cut himself off abruptly, but the slip was telling. Harry's eyes narrowed. Hoarding the what, Malfoy? Nothing, Draco said quickly. Just that you do better with friends from proper wizarding families, not blood traders, and, his eyes flicked dismissively to Hermione, whatever she is. I'm Hermione Granger, she said, lifting her chin defiantly. Muggle-born and proud of it. I wasn't talking to you, Draco snapped. He refocused on Harry. The offer stands, Potter, for now. With that, he and his cronies departed, leaving an uncomfortable silence in the compartment. Pleasant chap, Ron said sarcastically. His father's the same way, all pure blood this and tradition that. Dad can't stand him. His father's a Death Eater, Harry said quietly. He led an attack on our home 2 years ago, trying to steal the Philosopher's Stone. Hermione gasped. Harry. You never told me that. I wasn't allowed to, Harry said apologetically. Nicholas and Perenelle wanted to keep it quiet for security reasons. But now that the stone's at Hogwarts. Wait, what? Ron exclaimed. The actual Philosopher's Stone is at Hogwarts? Right now? Harry nodded. Under heavy protection. That's why Nicholas arranged to move it, it's safer at Hogwarts than anywhere else. And young Malfoy knows about it, Hermione observed grimly. That slip wasn't accidental. He was going to say, hoarding the stone. Which means Lucius Malfoy is still interested in it, Harry concluded. And may have told his son to befriend me to get information. Blimey, Ron breathed. And here I was worried about homework and Quidditch tryouts. Harry laughed despite the serious turn in conversation. Welcome to my life. Never simple. Well, you've got us now, Ron said firmly, surprising both Harry and Hermione with his immediate loyalty. My brothers say Hogwarts is safer than Gringotts. If the stone's there, and Dumbledore's there, it'll be fine. I hope you're right, Harry said, though privately he wasn't convinced. If Lucius Malfoy knew the stone was at Hogwarts, others might know too, possibly including Voldemort himself, in whatever form he currently existed. The rest of the journey passed more pleasantly. They bought snacks from the trolley which, swapped chocolate frog cards, and speculated about what Hogwarts would really be like beyond the descriptions in Hogwarts, a history, which Hermione had memorized and Ron had never opened. As the daylight faded and the train continued northward, Harry gazed out the window at the darkening countryside. Somewhere ahead was Hogwarts, and with it, the stone. He could feel its presence growing stronger as they approached, not urgently, not like when it had called to him during the Death Eater attack, but a steady, warm awareness. Whatever challenges lay ahead, at least he wouldn't face them alone. Potter Flamel, Harry. The great hall fell silent as Harry stepped forward toward the Sorting Hat. Whispers immediately erupted, following him like persistent shadows. Did she say Potter? The Harry Potter? Look at his scar. Flamel. Like the alchemist. Harry kept his gaze fixed on the stool, ignoring the murmurs as best he could. He sat down, and Professor McGonagall placed the ancient hat on his head, mercifully blocking his view of the staring students. Said a small voice in his ear. Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a connection to something ancient, how interesting. So where shall I put you? Harry gripped the edges of the stool, thinking of his parents, who had been in Gryffindor, and of Nicholas and Perenelle, who had both been Ravenclaws in their time at Hogwarts. He thought of Ron, already sorted into Gryffindor, and Hermione, who had also ended up there despite her bookish nature. I see them all in your thoughts, the hat murmured. But where would you thrive? You have ambition worthy of Slytherin, you know. They could help you on the way to greatness. Not Slytherin, Harry thought firmly. I don't need that kind of greatness. Are you sure? Well, if not Slytherin, then it better be Gryffindor. The last word was shouted to the entire hall. Harry removed the hat and walked, slightly dazed, toward the Gryffindor table, where Ron was cheering wildly along with the rest of his new house. The Weasley twins were yelling, "We got Potter! We got Potter!" while Percy the prefect stood to shake Harry's hand importantly. As Harry sat down between Ron and Hermione, he caught Dumbledore's eye at the staff table. The headmaster raised his goblet slightly in acknowledgement, his blue eyes twinkling. Beside him sat a sallow-faced man with a hooked nose and lank black hair, who was studying Harry with an inscrutable expression. "That's Snape," Ron whispered, noticing Harry's gaze. "Head of Slytherin. Fred and George say he always favors his own house." Harry nodded, remembering what Nicholas had told him about Severus Snape, his mother's childhood friend turned Death Eater turned spy. Their relationship was complicated, and Nicholas had warned Harry that Snape might have mixed feelings about teaching James Potter's son. On Dumbledore's other side sat a nervous-looking young man wearing a purple turban. As Harry's eyes passed over him, a sharp pain shot through the scar on his forehead. He winced, pressing his hand to it instinctively. "You all right?" Hermione asked, noticing immediately. "Yeah, just a headache," Harry replied, though it was more than that. The pain had been brief but intense, and strangely localized to his scar. Stranger still was the sudden unease he felt, not from his scar, but from his connection to the stone. It had flared momentarily, like a warning pulse, when he'd looked at the turbaned professor. "Who's that?" "With the turban?" he asked Percy quietly. "Professor Quirrell. Teaches defense against the dark arts. Brilliant mind, but nervous as anything. Rumor is he had a bad encounter with vampires in Albania and never quite recovered." Albania. The country Nicholas had mentioned as Voldemort's rumored hiding place after his downfall. Coincidence? Harry wasn't inclined to believe in those. The sorting concluded with Zabini, Blaise, going to Slytherin. Dumbledore stood and delivered a brief, eccentric welcome speech, nitwit. Blubber. Oddment. Tweak, before the feast appeared on the golden plates before them. As they ate, Harry observed his fellow Gryffindors. Neville Longbottom, a round-faced, forgetful boy who'd lost his toad on the train. Seamus Finnegan and Dean Thomas, already becoming fast friends. The Weasley twins, Fred and George, clearly the pranksters of the house. And older students, watching the first years with varying degrees of interest or amusement. "So what's it like living with Nicolas Flamel?" Seamus asked between bites of shepherd's pie. "Does he really turn lead into gold whenever you need pocket money?" Harry laughed. "Hardly. Nicholas believes alchemical knowledge should be used responsibly. He could bankrupt wizarding economies if he wanted to, but that would be pretty irresponsible. But he makes the elixir of life, right?" Dean pressed. "That's how he's lived so long." "Yes," Harry confirmed, choosing his words carefully. "But again, it's not something he uses frivolously or shares widely." "Would he make me some?" Seamus asked cheekily. "Only if you fancy the side effects of unnatural longevity," Hermione interjected. "Psychological isolation, watching everyone you love age and die, perpetual alienation from normal society." "Blimey, Hermione," Ron said. "Way to kill the mood." Harry smiled gratefully at Hermione. She'd effectively steered the conversation away from details about the stone itself, which was precisely what Nicholas had advised. Throughout the meal, Harry occasionally glanced at the staff table. Twice more he caught Quirrell looking his way, and each time, his scar gave a painful twinge. Equally concerning was the continued unease from his connection to the stone, a background hum of warning that hadn't settled since that first flare. By the time dessert arrived, Harry was developing a genuine headache from the combination of his scar's twinges, the stone's agitation, and the constant whispers about him throughout the hall. He was relieved when Percy finally led the Gryffindor first years from the Great Hall toward their dormitory. As they climbed the marble staircase, Harry felt the stone's presence shifting in his awareness, growing stronger in one direction, fainter in another. He could tell it was somewhere above them, possibly on the third floor. The realization startled him. He hadn't expected his connection to be precise enough for directional sensing. The third-floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds this year, Percy was saying as they climbed higher, to anyone who doesn't want to die a painful death. Ron looked alarmed. He's not serious, is he? Absolutely serious, Percy confirmed. Dumbledore's orders. No one knows why, or if they do, they're not telling prefects. Harry and Hermione exchanged significant glances. It seemed obvious that the forbidden corridor was related to the stone's protection. Finally, they reached the portrait of the fat lady, who guarded the entrance to Gryffindor Tower. Password, she demanded. Caput Draconis, Percy replied, and the portrait swung forward to reveal the cozy Gryffindor common room with its squashy armchairs and crackling fire. Percy directed the girls through one door to their dormitory and the boys through another. Harry followed Ron, Neville, Seamus, and Dean up the spiral staircase to their room, where 5 four-poster beds hung with deep red, velvet curtains awaited them. Their trunks had already been brought up. Brilliant, isn't it? Ron said, flopping onto his bed. Way better than sharing with just Percy at home. He snores like a hippogriff with allergies. Harry smiled tiredly. It's great. And it was. The tower room was warm, comfortable, and felt instantly welcoming. But as he changed into his pajamas and climbed into bed, he couldn't shake the lingering unease from his connection to the stone, nor forget the strange pain in his scar when he'd looked at Professor Quirrell. Something wasn't right at Hogwarts. And Harry had a feeling it wouldn't be long before he discovered what. The first week of classes proved both familiar and surprising to Harry. Thanks to his years of education with the Flamels, he was well ahead of the curriculum in most subjects. Charms and Transfiguration felt like review sessions rather than new material. Herbology offered some novel experiences. The Flamel estate had extensive gardens, but not the variety of magical plants found in Hogwarts greenhouses. History of magic was uniquely disappointing. Professor Binns, a ghost who had simply gotten up from the staff room one day leaving his body behind, droned on about goblin rebellions with such monotony that even Hermione struggled to maintain her usual enthusiastic note-taking. Harry had learned far more vibrant historical accounts from Nicholas, who had actually lived through many of the events Binns described. How can he make giant wars sound boring? Ron complained after their third lesson. They're giants. Warring. He's got a gift, Harry agreed. Or a curse. Defense against the dark arts, which Harry had particularly looked forward to, proved the biggest disappointment. Professor Quirrell's classroom smelled strongly of garlic, supposedly to ward off a vampire he'd encountered in Romania, and his teaching style consisted mostly of nervous stammering through theoretical concepts without any practical application. More concerning to Harry was that his scar invariably prickled painfully during Quirrell's classes, especially when the professor's back was turned. The stone's presence also felt more agitated during these lessons, though Harry couldn't determine if the two phenomena were connected. Potions, their last new subject of the week, promised to be challenging for entirely different reasons. The class took place in the dungeons, where the air was noticeably colder than in the rest of the castle. Professor Snape began with roll call, pausing dramatically at Harry's name. "Ah, yes," he said softly. "Harry Potter. Our new celebrity." Draco Malfoy and his friends Crabbe and Goyle sniggered behind their hands. Snape finished calling names and looked up at the class, his eyes cold and empty. "You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making," he began, speaking barely above a whisper but commanding complete attention. "As there is little foolish wand-waving here, many of you will hardly believe this is magic. I don't expect you will really understand the beauty of the softly simmering cauldron with its shimmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through human veins, bewitching the mind, ensnaring the senses. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, even stopper death, if you aren't as big a bunch of dunderheads as I usually have to teach." Silence followed this little speech. Harry exchanged looks with Ron, while Hermione sat on the edge of her seat, clearly desperate to prove she wasn't a dunderhead. "Potter," Snape said suddenly. "What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" Harry mentally thanked Nicholas for his thorough potions education. "The draught of living death, sir. An extremely powerful sleeping potion." Snape's eyes narrowed slightly. "Where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar?" "In the stomach of a goat," Harry answered promptly. "It's a stone that will save you from most poisons." Snape's expression didn't change, but a muscle twitched near his mouth. "What is the difference, Potter, between monkshood and wolfsbane?" "They're the same plant, sir," Harry said. "Also known as aconite." Snape stared at Harry for a long moment, his expression inscrutable. Then he addressed the class at large. "Well? Why aren't you all copying this down?" There was a sudden scrambling for quills and parchment. Over the noise, Snape added, "And a point to Gryffindor for adequate preparation, Potter." The grudging award of a single house point spoke volumes about Snape's feelings toward Harry. Throughout the rest of the lesson, as they worked on a simple potion to cure boils, Snape swept around the room criticizing almost everyone except Malfoy, whom he seemed to favor. He found fault with the way most Gryffindors cut their ingredients or stirred their cauldrons, but passed by Harry's work with nothing more than a brief glance and a slight frown. When Neville somehow managed to melt Seamus's cauldron, creating a rapidly spreading acid that burned holes in people's shoes, Snape cleared the mess with a wave of his wand and rounded on Harry, who had been working at the next table. "You, Potter. Why didn't you tell him not to add the porcupine quills before taking the cauldron off the fire? Thought it would make you look good if he got it wrong, did you? That's another point you've lost for Gryffindor." This was so unfair that Harry opened his mouth to argue, but Ron kicked him behind their cauldron. "Don't push it," he muttered. "I've heard Snape can turn really nasty." As they climbed the steps out of the dungeon an hour later, Harry's mind was racing. Snape clearly disliked him, but there seemed to be something more complex than simple antipathy behind his behavior. "Cheer up," said Ron. "Snape's always taking points off Fred and George. At least you earned one first. Can I come and meet Hagrid with you?" Harry had arranged to have tea with Hagrid, the groundskeeper, that afternoon. The giant man had been the one to deliver his Hogwarts letter, and had seemed to have known his parents. Hermione decided to join them as well, interested in learning more about the magical creatures Hagrid worked with. Hagrid lived in a small wooden house on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. When Harry knocked, they heard frantic scrabbling from inside and several booming barks. Then Hagrid's voice rang out, saying, "Back, Fong, back." Hagrid's big, hairy face appeared in the crack as he pulled the door open. "Hang on," he said. "Back, Fong." He let them in, struggling to keep a hold on the collar of an enormous black boarhound. The inside of the hut was cozy if cluttered, hams and pheasants hanging from the ceiling, a copper kettle boiling on the open fire, and a massive bed in the corner covered with a patchwork quilt. "Make yourselves at home," said Hagrid, letting go of Fong, who bounded straight at Ron and started licking his ears. Like Hagrid, Fong was clearly not as fierce as he looked. "This is Ron," Harry told Hagrid, who was pouring boiling water into a large teapot. "And Hermione." "Another Weasley, said Hagrid, glancing at Ron's freckles. "I spent half me life chasin' your twin brothers away from the forest." The rock cakes Hagrid offered nearly broke their teeth, but they pretended to enjoy them as they told Hagrid about their first lessons. Fong rested his head on Harry's knee and drooled all over his robes. They were delighted to hear Hagrid call Filch, the caretaker, that old git, and commiserate about Mrs. Norris, his sneaky cat. "And as fair that cat, Mrs. Norris, I'd like ter introduce her to Fong sometime. Dia know, every time I go up to the school, she follows me everywhere. Can't get rid of her, Filch puts her up to it." Harry told Hagrid about Snape's lesson, noticing that Hagrid, like Ron, told Harry not to worry about it, that Snape hardly liked any of the students. But Harry couldn't shake the feeling that Snape disliked him in particular, and for specific reasons rather than general misanthropy. "How's your guardians, Harry?" Hagrid asked, changing the subject. "Nicholas and Perenelle treatin' you good?" "They're brilliant," Harry said warmly. "Best thing that ever happened to me." "Good, good," Hagrid nodded approvingly. "I was worried when Dumbledore told me they'd taken ye from your aunt and uncle. Thought the blood protection was important. But seein' ye now, healthy and happy, they did right by ye." While Ron told Hagrid about his brother Charlie's work with dragons in Romania, Harry picked up a piece of paper that was lying on the table under the tea cozy. It was a cutting from the Daily Prophet. Gringotts break-in. Latest investigations continue into the break-in at Gringotts on July 31st, widely believed to be the work of dark wizards or witches unknown. Gringotts goblins today insisted that nothing had been taken. The vault that was searched had in fact been emptied the same day. "But we're not telling you what was in there, so keep your noses out if you know what's good for you," said a Gringotts spokesgoblin this afternoon. "Hagrid," said Harry. "That Gringotts break-in happened on my birthday. It might have been happening while we were there." Hagrid definitely didn't meet Harry's eyes. He grunted and offered him another rock cake. Harry read the story again. The vault that was searched had in fact been emptied the same day. Nicholas had arranged for the stone to be moved to Hogwarts over the summer. The timing couldn't be coincidental. When they walked back to the castle for dinner, Harry's pockets weighed down with rock cakes he'd been too polite to refuse. His mind was buzzing with new questions. Had Hagrid collected the stone from Gringotts? Had the break-in been an attempt to steal it? And if so, who was behind it? The stone's presence in his awareness felt slightly agitated, as if responding to his thoughts about it. Harry resolved to write to Nicholas that evening, sharing his suspicions and concerns. Something was definitely happening at Hogwarts, and Harry needed all the guidance he could get. Nicholas's reply arrived 3 days later, carried by a handsome eagle owl that landed before Harry at breakfast. "That's not Hedwig," Hermione observed unnecessarily. "No, it's one of Nicholas's owls," Harry confirmed, untying the letter from the bird's leg. "Faster and more discreet for important communications." The owl accepted a piece of bacon from Harry before taking flight again. Harry unfolded the letter, angling it so Ron and Hermione could read it too. He told them about his suspicions regarding the Gringotts break-in and the stone. "Dear Harry, your observations are astute, though not unexpected. Yes, the Gringotts incident was indeed an attempt to steal the stone, which Hagrid had removed that same day on Dumbledore's orders. This confirms our suspicion that someone, possibly V or his agents, is actively seeking it. Your description of your Scar's reaction to Professor Quirrell is particularly concerning. While I hesitate to jump to conclusions, the coincidence of his recent time in Albania, where we believe V has been hiding, and your physical reaction to his presence bears watching. Keep your distance as much as possible, and inform Dumbledore immediately if the pain intensifies or is accompanied by unusual magical phenomena. Regarding the stone, your strengthened directional sense of its location is an interesting development. This may prove useful, but exercise extreme caution. Do not attempt to locate or access the stone's precise hiding place. The protections around it are designed to be lethal to unauthorized individuals, and your connection does not grant you safe passage. Continue your occlumency exercises nightly. Maintain awareness without active probing. And remember, your safety is paramount. If you sense immediate danger, go to Dumbledore or McGonagall without delay. We are both immensely proud of your sorting into Gryffindor, though of course we would have been equally pleased with any house. Your courage has always been one of your finest qualities. Write again if anything changes, however minor it may seem. With love, Nicholas, and Perenelle, who says to remember your vitamins. He thinks Quirrell might be working for you-know-who? Ron whispered, eyes wide after reading the letter. Quirrell. He's afraid of his own shadow. Which would make him the perfect disguise, Hermione pointed out reasonably. No one would suspect him. Harry nodded, folding the letter and tucking it into his robes. The timing fits too. he took a year off to gain practical experience and traveled to Albania, where Voldemort's supposed to be hiding. Ron flinched at the name but didn't comment on it. What are we going to do? Watch him, Harry said simply. And I'll talk to Dumbledore if anything else happens with my scar. And the stone? Hermione asked quietly. Nicholas seems worried that your connection to it is growing stronger. Harry frowned. I'm not sure. I can definitely sense its direction more clearly now, but I couldn't pinpoint its exact location if I tried. It's more like awareness of its general presence. Which is on the third floor, in the Forbidden Corridor, Ron guessed. Most likely, Harry agreed. But Nicholas is right, whatever protections they've put around it are probably dangerous. We should stay away. Hermione and Ron nodded agreement, though Harry suspected that, like him, they were intensely curious about what those protections might entail. Their opportunity to find out came sooner than expected, and in the most unlikely way. It started with Malfoy challenging Harry to a wizard's duel at midnight in the trophy room, after Harry had embarrassed him during their first flying lesson by catching Neville's Remembrall in a spectacular dive that led to Harry being appointed the youngest Seeker in a century rather than expelled as Malfoy had hoped. Don't go, Hermione advised when Ron accepted the challenge on Harry's behalf. It's obviously a trap. He'll tip off Filch and get you into trouble. But Ron was insistent, and Harry was tired of Malfoy's constant needling. When midnight came, they slipped out of Gryffindor Tower, only to find Hermione waiting for them in the common room, determined to stop them. After a brief argument that woke Neville, who had been sleeping outside the portrait hole, having forgotten the password, all four ended up heading to the trophy room together. Malfoy and his second, Crabbe, never showed up. Instead, they heard Filch's voice approaching, confirming Hermione's suspicion that it had been a setup. They fled, taking a wrong turn in their haste and ending up in the forbidden third-floor corridor. To escape Filch, they ducked through a locked door that Hermione opened with a quick Alohomora charm. They found themselves in a corridor, and as their eyes adjusted to the dimness, they realized they weren't alone. A monstrous dog filled the whole space between ceiling and floor. It had 3 heads, 3 pairs of rolling, mad eyes, 3 noses, twitching and quivering in their direction, 3 drooling mouths, saliva hanging in slippery ropes from yellowish fangs. It was standing quite still, all 6 eyes staring at them, and Harry knew that the only reason they weren't already dead was that their sudden appearance had taken it by surprise. But it was quickly getting over that, there was no mistaking what those thunderous growls meant. Harry groped for the doorknob, between Filch and death, he'd take Filch. They fell backward, Harry slamming the door shut, and ran, almost flew, back down the corridor. Filch must have hurried off to look for them somewhere else, because they didn't see him anywhere, but they hardly cared, all they wanted to do was put as much space as possible between them and that monster. They didn't stop running until they reached the portrait of the fat lady on the 7th floor. "Where on earth have you all been?" she asked, looking at their flushed faces. "Never mind that, pig snout," panted Harry, and the portrait swung forward. They scrambled into the common room and collapsed, trembling, into armchairs. It was a while before any of them said anything. Neville, indeed, looked as if he'd never speak again. "What do they think they're doing, keeping a thing like that locked up in a school?" said Ron finally. "If any dog needs exercise, that one does." Hermione had got both her breath and her bad temper back. "You don't use your eyes, any of you, do you?" she snapped. "Didn't you see what it was standing on?" "The floor," Harry suggested. "I wasn't looking at something went wrong with this response, please try again." Trace ID, B210393-72E4 Carry on with the next chapter. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.